Hi everyone, thanks for watching. You can support our work on our website ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, BitChute and Brighteon. And remember to hit the bell for notifications. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook. To be sure not to miss any of our shows, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website ageoftruth.tv.
They always put the truth out in one form or another, whether it be in a movie or a book or an article or the news, some fragment of the truth, because they don't want the karma, because they cannot lie 100%. They will create really bad karma for themselves. So they always reveal the truth in one form or another. But it's always put in a way where you kind of think it's fantasy or fiction. He says, I'm terrified. But he did say the next billionaires will be food growers. And he said, the money's going to be worthless. He said, this is the other thing he said. He said, the banks, when they decide to shut this money system down, the banks will shut down and say they're on holiday. And the gas stations and everything, there'll be some excuse, some diversion or for reason to shut it all down. And he says, when it reopens, it will be the new world order. It will be the new money. It will be the new energy system. And it's going to be a complete revamp. Now, he said they do have the vaults with all the seeds and everything, and they do already have underground places, and they do clone. He said the cloning is very real. That aliens definitely work in the government, and they shapeshift, and they're walking all over the place, and they're all over the British royal crown. He says the queen is a big shapeshifter. She's gargantuan. She's really scary. Everybody's afraid of her because she's huge. When she shapeshifts, she's huge. And he says that they're definitely, he said that they brainwash, they put people in a trance so you don't really see them. So they can shapeshift. But he said for him, something happened where it didn't take. And he remember he saw the reptilians. He saw them. And he said it's all satanic. He says they do rituals regularly, and even stuff on the certain dates. They use sacred geometry a lot. And that's why even if you look at the government building, it's sacred geometry, and then it's put in alignment with the stars because there's certain vortexes of energy. So they use the stars a lot. They do the above and below thing. But he said that there was going to be a massive depopulation. Huge.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 4th of January 2023, and we welcome you to a new special in our Life Stories series, where you will be introduced to different people with very unusual, extraordinary, and often horrendous or extreme experiences. Life stories that can either inspire, change, help to transform, or inform those who research delicate or otherworldly topics, all out of the norm. Our guest today is a singer, an actress, and a model, and now she's an animal rescuer and a truth researcher. She has transformed her shocking trauma-based childhood and many years of working in Hollywood, trying to become a star while having to face rape and extreme challenges, to become a very well-informed truth researcher and, in a way, a Gnostic, having had many esoteric, spiritual, and occult experiences in her life. She is with us today to inspire change, to be honest and candid about her life, and to be an inspiration and a voice for those who have gone through either a satanic upbringing or a broken home where daily torture came from the ones who were supposed to protect them, the parents. Erika Nann. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and hello and good day to our very special guest today, Erika Nann, joining us from Ocala, Florida. Erika, it's wonderful to have you on Age of Truth TV.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
You are in Florida right now, and we had a lot of problems getting connected to you today because there was almost no coverage there, and we couldn't get through to you. So you had to jump into your car and to drive quite a while away from your ranch, your horse ranch. You are in a horse, well, it's a horse area, I suppose. You can talk about that, and that's the reason why you're actually in the car, and the connection is fine now, huh?
Yeah, we went through a lot. I mean, between your stuff breaking down, my stuff breaking down, it's almost like something was trying to stop this interview. And I'm glad that I really actually thought that you were going to cancel it, because I thought this is like going to scare you or something. You're going to say, oh, this is a sign we shouldn't do it, and I really felt like I really want to do this interview. So thank you for doing this. And I really love you for giving the platform for this.
This is so great. And well, we've been through a lot during those 11 years we've been on the air. We've seen everything, and also some strange connections and breakups and whatnot many times. But this one was unusual. I have to say that people don't know what we all went through here also, technically, even in our studio here in Copenhagen, which is usually fine. But it's just wonderful to have you on. And this is, we're doing this new series on Age of Truth TV called Life Stories. And boy, you really have some life story to tell the audience, and so much to talk about. And there's a lot to cover because, well, first of all, you are a singer and an actress and a model who became an animal rescuer and a truth researcher. And your life story is, of course, very hair-raising and gruesome, thought-provoking, and everything. We're going to go into details, very in-depth in this interview, and hear where you came from and your very, very difficult childhood and going into Hollywood. So first of all, before we start going back to your early days, please talk about Hollywood, when you came there and embarked on your career many years ago. Did you at any point ever have to make a deal with the devil?
No, I never did. But I was married to an actor, and it was interesting because when the relationship was going really bad, I remember I went to a psychic, because back then I didn't trust my own intuition. So I went to a psychic. I remember she said, well, forget about him being faithful, and forget about that he'll stay with you for life. He's an opportunist, and he's made a deal with the devil. So it's that important to him. And I remember he and I did ecstasy a few times, and I'm not a person that promotes those kind of things, but I had so many blocks, and he came from a hippie family. So he talked me into taking ecstasy, and we hiked up into the hills. And I remember when he really opened up, he was very obsessed with his body, his looks, making it. And I remember this drug opens you up. So I'm feeling all this incredible love and serotonin, and I'm just full of joy, saying, oh my God, I want to be with you forever. You're so beautiful. Oh my God, your eyes. Oh my God, look at this tree. Look at you're so seeing the world in such a beautiful way. But with him, it was interesting because it was all about the self-centeredness, which I never forgot that. That drug really does, it's like a truth serum. So the psychic said he made a deal with the devil, and it didn't surprise me because he kind of really was under the belief that, and I understand this too, that there is really no good or evil, and that God is coming from both sides. Just one is the shadow and one's the light. But so some people kind of look at it like Bob Dylan or other people like Katy Perry that said they made deals with the darkness. that maybe somewhere inside of them, they say, this is my hat I'm going to wear in this lifetime. Because I believe we've all worn the dark hat in one lifetime or another. But in this lifetime, I was never even tempted, even though I did feel the presence. I really did. I felt the presence of a being saying, sign on the dotted line, like the esoteric dotted line.
Oh, that was like from another realm, not a physical realm, because we do hear a lot of actors and singers in Hollywood, if they want to climb the ladder and want to get to a certain point, then they do like a physical ritual, a ceremony, where they kind of, devote themselves to, let's say, the devil or satanic, a satanic circle of people there. And that was what I was actually talking about. If you ever came to that point.
Oh God, no. And I know that there were people that wanted to introduce me to people that were connected. And obviously when I had a record deal with CBS Records, probably that would have come down the road, because there was just a very dark energy around that whole deal. Even though I got signed clean and simple, but I started really shooting up really fast and getting very popular very fast. And the music was doing phenomenal. And the producer that produced the album, I remember he was like, you owe me, and he raped me. And then, of course, I broke my contract and got out of it immediately. So then I never saw a dime from the album or anything. But I know that path, if I would have done that, it probably would have led me to meeting the people that do the satanic rituals. Because I did meet somebody recently that is tied into those groups. And she told me that the killing the babies and the drinking the blood and eating their flesh is all very real. And she's tied in with all the big names. And she was terrified even talking about it. Like she said, I really don't want to talk about it because it's scary just talking about it.
And did she experience that herself?
Yes, she was actually invited to some of the parties where those rituals were taking place. And I don't know if they brainwashed them so they don't remember some of it, but I don't want to name names because I don't want to get in trouble for that. But there are some very, very, very top actors that she mentioned. And what's really weird is I think that there are light workers that go into that too, because one particular person, I said, I know that person's not a dark soul. So I do think that there are light workers, sometimes even working in some of the darkest places. But
then they wouldn't be light workers, would they?
Well, I don't, again, it's like there was an old saying that says the person that does the chopping block, like in the old days that you had to chop the head off, they said the person that's sinful is the one that enjoys doing it. And then there's another person who's doing it because they have to, and I don't really know where that line is drawn because I'm not one to judge it. But
if you're pressured or threatened, you mean?
Let's just say you're born into it and you're a child that's been brought up in it and no different. And there are Hollywood people in Australia, some people from Australia that there were some major dark family lines there. And I think that how can you blame a child that's born into the royal family? There's got to be something karmic in that, where this is the role that they came to play. But now that we're on this topic, I do believe that it's a very interesting thing when you've really seen a lot of the darkness in the world, a lot of the shadow. And I've had a lot of astral attacks in my sleep, especially after the age of 22, after I lost my virginity, actually, which I think there's something tied into that, because I started getting very, very, very severe astral attacks where I was paralyzed. And sometimes I could see the being with my eyes closed. And it was very much of the Grim Reaper looking skeleton, cape, hands like claws. And it would be over my bed. And even though my eyes were closed, I could see it. And I could feel the talons wrapped around my ankles and my wrists. And it would be this close to my mouth, sucking my breath out. And I knew that if I wouldn't have pushed my will, it would have killed me in my sleep. And that has happened to me twice, really, really severe, where I think it was three times. I was actually dating the Paul Nassif, the Beverly Hills surgeon that has a show. Paul Nassif, I dated him for 5 years or so. And I was sleeping in the same bed, and I was having one of those astral attacks. And I remember it was a devil pushing me up into the wall and closing my throat off. And he was literally punching me to wake me up, like hitting me in the stomach to get me to breathe, because he said I'd stopped breathing.
But were you paralyzed, and weren't you able to move at all, or do something with your body, or it was only with your mind you could do something, or what?
Yes, exactly. I was fighting with everything I had with my mind, and he was hearing me like do like these, like trying to make sounds, but I couldn't breathe. So it's very interesting that these beings exist. They don't have a form, but I'm convinced that these beings eat the energy that some people produce with low vibrational sex, anger, war, jealousy, the 7 sins, basically. I mean, if anything, any addiction, you're going to have these astral entities feeding off of your energy, because they don't eat physical food. And that's where it ties back to these rituals.
And that's actually what's happening all over the world right now. That's an international thing right now, that everybody is exposed to, let's say, archon attacks and that energy sucking you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I really believe that when they talk about in the Bible, and I've studied the Bible, but I'm just saying, they call this the Great Harvest. And I believe this is the harvest. It's the people that are just oblivious. They're walking almost like zombies. They're watching the television. They're going to their manicures, their hairdressers, out to dinner, the grocery stores and everything. And they're so disconnected from the earth. And I think that this earth is the people that walk on this earth very quietly without disturbing anything are the meek. The meek are the ones that inherit the earth. It's probably going to be the little goat herders in the Himalayas or something. It's not us. We're not. I mean, if there's 1 in a million of the people that live in the cities, I'd be surprised, because I think that we probably incarnated from Atlantis or something, and we're learning all of the things that we didn't in all the other lifetimes. And I think that's why so many of us are being challenged. And I know, Lord, I've told you mine is like 10 lifetimes in one, if not 20.
But don't you think if you wake up to understand what the world is really about, and having done the homework here that is really necessary to put all of the millions of dots together, because this is a very complex puzzle and all the pieces really fit in there, but you really have to do a lot of studying and research in order to understand that everything is upside down, that the whole world is part of this matrix and we're all in this enclosure, but that it's all basically an illusion and a dark illusion that we're in this dimension, huh?
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that too, because one of the things that they've really, well, first off, I really believe that however it ties down from Egypt or the Sumerians to Rome, the Romans very calculatedly said, we are going to dissolve this empire into the church. Instead of it being church and state, we're going to rule through the church and look very innocent, which they're the furthest thing from innocent, as the British royals are as well. But I think that everything was very manipulated to keep us in the dark, to keep us being afraid and seeing God outside of us. And I think that when I hear anyone say, oh, will God help you, or God will come, or God will be with you, I'm like, but why you talk like God's outside of you? God's in everything. That's how anything exists, whether it's a tree, a truck, what you're eating, that's why when I rescue, I see God in absolutely, it doesn't matter if it's an ant, a tick, a worm, a leaf, a tomato, a person, a pig, a dog. It doesn't, the form has nothing to do with it. The physical suit has nothing. If you took, let's just say everything was burned in a big massive fire, you'd start seeing all the little orbs of light floating up into the ethers. Everything is little orbs of light. And it's interesting because I did have a prophetic dream where I was and I did have prophetic dreams when I was young too, just so you know. I had many where I saw future scenarios. But this dream that I had was not too long ago, and I was falling with a massive amount of people, and it felt like a big dark hole, just huge, like a cavern. And it was bottomless, and everybody was screaming. And I remember I thought, I don't want to fall like that. So this moment I said, I don't want to engage with what they're doing, I stopped falling. And then all of a sudden I started hearing these little giggles behind me. And I looked up like this as I was floating, and I saw these little orbs behind me giggling. And then I got sucked into an orb. And then I had the Kundalini experience where I was having what felt like multiple orgasms, but it was the Kundalini. It wasn't sexual. It was that energy coming through your third eye. And all through the spine, all through the body. And it was just it
was a Kundalini awakening in a way.
Yes. And it was in that in-between state of dreaming and being awake.
Lucid dreaming.
Yes. I was very, very aware that I was sleeping, but I was very aware I was awake. It was the two. And I've had many, many, many dreams like that too. That's why when these astral attacks happen, at the moment they start happening, I know what's going on and I snap out of it. And then I'm in that in-between state again.
Have you had those astral attacks more than those 2 times you talk about?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
And do you think it could be something that it could have something to do with how you were traumatized and programmed as a child? Because ever since you were born, even on the day of birth, you had to go through trauma. And I think this is, and we're going to detail all of that as much as we can, but just to get back to that Hollywood story there, you were working as a singer and you were working as an actress. And I think just before we go on, I think we should see a little clip of one of your music videos from way back was it in '89 that you did one called Baby, I Love You?
Yeah. I love you, baby.
Let's check that one out. That was a really fascinating video, and that look that you have there, that's you are very sharp and assertive, a little bit dangerous there, huh?
That was Robert Palmer. Remember the Addicted to Love? I thought those women were so beautiful. I guess I kind of wanted to look like one of those models.
Amazing. And you were a model, of course, as well. And I think you were Miss Wisconsin of 1980, right?
I was a teenager. Yeah. 1980. I was 17 when I won it. Yes.
Wow.
So, yeah. And it's interesting because every time that you mention one of the careers of the dreams that I pursued, there was always some dark force that got attached immediately. As soon as I started rising, like with the modeling, I was the 3rd ranked most booked model in St. Louis at that time. And I just hit with a bang. I was booked and I was making $100 an hour. And it was, so I went from rags to living like poverty. And
$100 an hour, and we're talking like
in the 80s, yeah,
in the early 80s or something.
84.
Right.
Yeah, I believe I started at $65 an hour, but then when I started working so much, my rate went up to $100 an hour. And then I met at one of the shoots, I met a very wealthy millionaire. And he was the one that pursued me relentlessly. And I was still a virgin at 22. So after 7-8 months, he finally I succumbed to him because he just pursued me. He was really a nice man. I mean, he wasn't bad, but what was weird when I first met him, my hair stood up on my neck and I was like an animal. I was afraid of him. And in the end, it turned out he became very predatory and very possessive, and he was still married. And then he had my phones tapped. And then I remember one time he had a place in Aspen, Colorado, and I overheard him talking in the jacuzzi with a guy who, I don't want to mention any names, but this person worked undercover for the government. I heard it all through the conversation that he had just killed somebody. He was an ex-military guy. And
the guy that you knew that you were in Aspen with?
Not him, his friend that he was in the jacuzzi with. So he was talking about some guy he had just killed, and now he had a hard on when he killed him, and it was horrible. He says, oh, I was waiting for this guy, and when he came out and I killed him, he goes, I couldn't believe how turned on I got. And I was like sitting there, I'm like a child. My mentality back then was, you know, I knew a possessive mother and child abuse and this and that, but I mean, I was like, this was like so freaky to hear a conversation like this. So.
And what did that guy say when that other guy with a hard on started talking like that?
Nothing. They were just kind of like doing the guy thing. And I think at one point I heard them both laughing, but you know, the jacuzzi was loud. So they were talking loud over the bubbles and the machine, you know, but yeah, that was a very scary moment. And then I really realized I was with a very dark person, because anybody who has a friend like that can't be. And then all of a sudden I got a call one day after being with him for 7 months. No, I was with him a year and a half, but I got a call from his wife. And I said, you mean ex-wife? She goes, no, I mean his wife. And I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. Here I'm involved with somebody who's married. And then I heard that conversation in the jacuzzi.
For a year and a half, and you didn't know he was married. He lied to you or what?
Absolutely. But, and then I, you know, again, I thought I was going to get married and everything. And so that dream just went out the window. And of course I left St. Louis because I was really afraid of him. I thought he got so possessive and narcissistic, and I knew my phones were tapped, and he had people watching me and driving behind me. And it just got really creepy. So I remember I left and I went incognito, and I thought I'll go to California. But I think before California, I stopped in Milwaukee for 7-8 months just to kind of live in a hotel. And I took I bought a horse when I was in Aspen, Colorado, and I brought him with me. And anyway, many things that happened, but that was that. And then, like I said, with the record contract, the producer raped me as soon as I started rising. And then with the movies.
Yeah, but just before you go on with that, what do you mean he raped you? What's the story? What's the story there?
He started feeling like I owed him, and he was like basically saying, you would never have this if it wasn't for me. But before he started saying that after he raped me. Before, he just tricked me to a motel. It wasn't even a hotel, it was a motel.
And this was, I'm sorry to jump in a few times, here, Erika, but I mean, this was when you had already signed the deal with CBS and you were on their label, and you had already done music and were performing.
Yeah, there were 3 number-1 hits on the charts, and they were saying that I was climbing like Madonna in Mexico. It was just, they said she's going to be a superstar. And interesting, because Selena, when I dropped my contract, it was like Selena just took that path that I probably would have. She's a much better singer, much more dynamic, but there was a market there.
But wasn't that the actress who died in a plane crash, or the singer?
She was a singer. She got murdered by one of her workers, a Mexican worker. That same thing. She got very possessive over her, and she trapped her in a motel. Kind of same thing. Isn't that weird that I got tricked into a motel and got raped, and Selena got tricked by this woman into a hotel. I think it was a motel. It was a motel. And it was something about a ring she gave her or something. And this maid wanted to talk to her assistant. It was her assistant. And she tricked her there. And then she pulled out a gun and killed her. So isn't that interesting? That very similar. And I really felt that if I would have stayed in that industry the way I was going, I would have ended up dead. I don't know why.
Oh, wow, yeah, unbelievable. But this was in Mexico, and this was where you were climbing. It was not in California, although you made the deal there, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I was recording everything in in California. And they said that I could live in California and just promote and tour and everything from California and go to Mexico. But then in the end, they wanted me to move to Mexico and they wanted me to have a permanent residence there. They wanted me to sell my horse because they said it was too dangerous. And I had a black manager and they said they didn't like me being seen with a black manager because back then it was very racist, especially Mexico, believe it or not. It was very different times. So there was just lots of weird, and then I got raped.
And why did that even happen? You had already signed the deal. It wasn't to get the deal. That's what we hear a lot with the Me Too movement and what happened with Harvey Weinstein and all those people. But you were already there climbing.
Yeah, no, this was the opposite. He felt like I owed him. It was like, I did all this for you. Now you're getting famous. Now you're going to, and I'm going to get left in the dust kind of thing. Because then at that point, I can hire any producer I want. I don't need him anymore,
But couldn't you just say no and say, I'm not going to a motel of all places with you?
I didn't think he was going to rape me. He was like an uncle. I was friends with his wife. I loved his two little girls. I trusted him 100,000,000%. I never in a million years ever thought he was going to do that to me. I mean, we had traveled before and he'd never done anything. And like I said, I was good friends with his wife and his family. It took 7 months to record the album and we did lots of demos. So no, he was it's almost as though he had gotten possessed or something, like something took him over. And that's why, again, it all ties back to like this life that we're living. What is it with these attacks that come, whether it's through a lover, a narcissist, in the form of a boss, a producer, a boyfriend, a brother, a mother? It just seems that, like, again, when I sit down and I think about my life, I go, it feels like I have been pursued by those dark shadows for a very, very long time. Those things that held me down, trying to take my breath, but is that the very same thing that is also purifying me and making me stronger? That's the question. Because the light is going to lift you and fill you with love. But what is really going to purify you? It's usually fire. It's usually pain. It's usually pressure. So for me, I sometimes think that I come here. Oh, this person's probably going to ask me. Hi. How are you? Oh, I'm good. I just had a bad connection with my phone, so I'm parked here on video. Oh, I have to leave. Okay, thank you. See what I mean? Okay, so I'm going to put you down a second.
Wow, this is a lot is happening. This is really an adventure following you today.
And can you see how as soon as I talk about what the entities and stuff, look at what happens. I'm telling you, this is an affirmation. I always say when something like that happens, it's an affirmation.
It's certainly something. I mean, we've never done shows like this before, but it's very fascinating. Certainly, I just hope that you're not going to break up again with your connection now that it's so good.
Yeah.
But why is the connection so bad at your own ranch, your own place? Because you have quite a beautiful place there, it seemed, with your horses and everything. But I mean, well, at least you're not getting fried by 5G, huh?
I was just saying, yes. But it's just because of the amount of trees, and I live in a brick home. But even when I was outside, I didn't have connections. So, okay, so let me get situated again. Well, and getting back to Hollywood, when I first got there, I thought, oh my God, this is it. I've made it. This is it. This is where I belong. And I really believe I was someone reincarnated that was in film and that had done well, maybe in the 50s, and there's so many directors that were there and stuff that said, God, you look familiar, and this and that, and older people that, and I don't know, there's just something there. I don't know. I've never done a regression. It's not important. But I feel that whatever I did, I completed that cycle. And I said, okay, it's definitely not for me. I'm out.
Maybe you had that look of the old-fashioned Hollywood star because you were a little bit darker and more mysterious, and actually that wasn't really what you saw a lot in movies and on television in the 80s. You know, that was basically who was there. Well, Joan Collins, maybe.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It was more of a blonde like Farrah Fawcett and real pretty little blondes. But so yeah, Hollywood definitely, even the word Hollywood, is like the staff of the wizard. And I really think that if you look at wizards and warlocks, they're tied into the druids. And the druids infiltrated from the Dark and the White Brotherhood from Atlantis. And they were the ones that would help the kings and the queens make decisions. And they really had a great amount of respect. But then what happened was they started getting killed off because I think the rulers thought, you know what, these druids are a little too powerful. But I think even how interesting is it with Santa Claus, because he's dressed like a druid. And he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So I wonder if these druids have lost they don't need physical form anymore. And I wonder if they're somehow tied in with the archons and stuff, because I've really thought what happened to the druids and see all of that blood sacrifice. It goes back to, whether it was Incas or the Indians or the Romans, there's always been blood sacrifice. Even if you look at Spain with the bullfighting and the Roman Colosseums were all through there, and they're always next to a steeple with like an antenna and this circular pen where the games or whatever. And even now, if you look at football and everything, why is it always like in an arena very similar to a Colosseum? And it's that energy of all the people in a circle screaming, and concerts are the same, football games are the same.
Well, the circle is Saturn, of course, the rings of Saturn, which is where Santa comes from. That's another, Satan, Santa,
Saturday.
And Saturday, Saturn's day, yes, and Cronus, which is the god who looks like Santa, and the Grim Reaper, the prohibitor, really, which is what Saturn is also astrologically, but also possibly a lot of researchers talk about that the rings of Saturn, those beams are, let's say, holding us captured within this matrix here, putting us under constant frequency control.
Yes, it's got to be something like that. And how interesting that 3D is electromagnetic. It's the two extremes. No matter how you spin it, you're always going to be in the two extremes trying to find balance. And I think the balance is impossible. It's like sitting on a razor's edge. You can't. It's going to cut you in half, or you're going to fall over. And I think that's why this ascension of trying to get out of this two polarity extreme thing, which how do you do that when right now the scales are obviously tipping into war and destruction, and I think that first off, there's a lot of karma to be paid for what's been done to this planet and all the wars and all the sacrificing of animals and children and people through war, because all those wars are always started on a certain date, whether it's a solstice or an equinox or whatever. There's always something to those dates.
It's the numbers, right? It's numerology and gematria. You can always follow that, and you'll get the truth, and all of the numbers add up. And also the symbolism. Now that they just turned on CERN's Large Hadron Collider after 3 years, and interestingly enough, that is also a ring underneath the ground in Geneva. They're also a ring symbolizing Saturn as well, and CERN's logo is 3 6s, 666.
Oh yeah.
So everything is Satanism. And did you see this in Hollywood when you were there? Please also talk about that situation with the rape. I mean, how did you get out of it, or did you get out of it?
Oh, it lasted literally under 5 minutes. And after he did his business. I mean, he literally looked at me like I was trash, which is very interesting because I think those entities or whatever that's taking over that person, because they're not in their right mind. This is an addiction. And this is little minions that were probably probing at him saying, feed me, feed me, feed me, and then putting the idea to take me physically. And then once those little minions or demons are fed, they're like, okay, we're satisfied, we're plump, you know, we're happy. And I think that that ties in also to why I've been celibate for so long, because see, these are things we're not taught. You connect to astral cords. There's so much with sexual energy. Forget the physical part that you're exchanging all that DNA and all that saliva and fluids. And basically when you sleep with one person, you sleep with everyone they've slept with. I'm so sorry about the noise. But I think that again, why do priests want to be celibate? Why do they fast?
Well, are they really? A lot of them aren't. If we look at the Catholic priests, I mean, and what's going on in the Vatican and other places, other churches.
Because they give into those little minions. Because see, when they do these rituals, they're feeding the archons or the demons or the entities. They're feeding them. That's what happened, is everything got corrupt through the darkness. And you don't see it. That there's more in the unseen world than the seen. And I think that these priests get taken over because maybe there was one thought, or maybe they did something. It's you have got to be so diligent to keep your thoughts pure, keep your diet clean. Sometimes I talk to people and I go, why are you seed eating dead animals? And yet this is your temple. Why would you be putting dead animals in your temple when prophets or spiritual leaders have said, this is your temple, honor it? It's because every cell is conscious. And when you think about, we've got this enormous, beautiful organic machine working for us 24/7 that's very conscious. And I'll bet you if you take a cell down to the tiniest level, and there'll probably be a point where you'll be able to communicate with every single cell. And then you'll say, wow, they can hold a conversation just like me, maybe better. You know, we don't know. I think that we limit ourselves so much. But to me, there's no doubt that people get taken over and they don't do exorcisms anymore. And I'm not talking about evangelicals saying healing, you know, I'm talking about where you do purifications, where you yourself boot out the dark energy. When you yourself feel when your energy's dark, or you're feeling negative, or you're snappy, something is clinging onto you. And that's when you should do a fast. That's when you should sit in a corner and cleanse, or sage, or whatever. Jump in cold water, take a walk in the mountains. And I think that the planet is one of the few things that can really transmute those dark energies.
That is to purify yourself from all of that the archon invasion, basically. And I think a lot of people are actually possessed by archons in one way or the other, and it will come out in forms like addictions and lots of different psychological problems and bad attachment to people as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very well put. And even let's say you have a drug addict mother, the entities could come into the child. So then you have a child that's now born with an entity. And, you know, some cultures really believe the child has an archangel with them till they're 7. Now, I did have an angel experience when I was 7, where an angel came into my bedroom and sat on my bed with me and talked to me. And
how did you see that? How did you experience that? What did it look like? How do you know it was an angel?
Well, you really don't. That's your very good point. It was someone that I knew, and I was very, very much an insomniac when I was a child. From the time I was 3.5 to probably 15, I just couldn't sleep. But so we were in a very tiny house. We were very poor. I don't know how much you want to talk about the childhood, but I guess
I definitely want that, but I want to go into that when we kind of have talked about your experiences in Hollywood. But please do tell that story with the angel story.
Okay, so I was very suicidal, and I remember lying in bed, and I was really contemplating why. Believe it or not, I was talking to the star people, and I was wondering why my star family wasn't coming to get me. I didn't know. Now I understand it completely. But I used to look out the window and I'd look at the stars. And then what happened was the light got very, very bright in the window, then got bright in the room. And I was sharing a room with my brother and my older sister, and they didn't wake up. And then the next thing I knew, I had this very lovely looking young, looked like a man, but maybe androgynous, but maybe 22, blonde, blue-eyed, wearing a nice muslin type robe. It was very soft. He sat next to me and I was sitting next to him. And I remember touching the muslin with my finger, just stroking it because it was so soft. And then I remember the roof of the ceiling disappeared and he pointed to the stars and he said, "That's you right there." And he pointed to one of the stars.
But that could have been a Pleiadian or a Nordic, as they are described.
Could have been. And then I remember I was filled with a joy that, I mean, you have to understand, I was never, ever treated with much love or respect. It was a very, very, very abusive, cold home. So I was filled with this love that I couldn't even put into words. And I was so full of joy. And that's when I knew, I'm sweating, so it's hot, but I knew at that moment that my life was going to be somewhat different than the norm. And he said to me, and I say he because that's what he looked like to me as a child. He said to me, "I'm never alone, but I would not see him again, but I'm not alone." And that this was a secret, that there would come a time when I'd be able to talk about it, but not anytime soon, that I would not be understood. And then he left and he infused me with something that, I mean, well, it's never left me. For one, it's never left me. I've always, always, always carried that inside of me, just knowing I'm not alone, knowing I saw him, knowing I physically touched him, knowing that he infused, knowing that the whole roof of the house was suddenly gone and he's showing me the star, and he pointed out a particular star that was me.
And it wasn't a dream. It was, you could physically touch him and see him, and then the roof will just, well, demolished, or
no, it was just invisible. It was like as though the molecules just dissolved.
Because this is a holographic reality.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and he came right through the wall as light, and then he was on the bed the next, and I knew him. That was the crazy thing. I knew him. So the next day when I woke up, I mean, I was just happy. And I remember everybody in the family was just, I could really see their darkness suddenly. And they were all angry and they're going, "What are you so happy about?" And I was just like, "Nothing." And they're like, "No, something's up. What's going on?" And I said, "No, nothing." And it was like, and I knew it was my secret. And I said, "I'm never going to give up this secret because this is so special what happened to me, that they'll destroy it somehow, or they'll make fun of it, or they say I'm crazy." So it was my secret. And I didn't tell anybody till I was probably in my 20s, and even then people didn't believe it because they always think, "Oh, you must have been dreaming," or it was probably your childhood trauma and you concocted it to help you. No, I will, to the day I die, say absolutely no, no, no. As real as you and me sitting here right now.
That sounds really fascinating, but a lot of people do have had experiences like this, so it's certainly not the first time I hear about this. So I find it quite interesting, and it's always different. It's always interesting to hear different people's stories who doesn't know each other. So that's kind of fascinating, and it has happened to many. But I mean, okay, so we can go back to the Hollywood part of your life, but maybe we should start with your childhood maybe and go into that now, because it did shape what did happen to you later and what is going on now and why you want to come out and talk about this. And I guess this is in order to be an inspiration for people who has gone through a lot of trauma. And your trauma started very, very early when you were born, right? Literally on that day.
Yeah, my mother was pregnant with me, and my father crashed into the side of a hill because there was a one lane road on a mountain, and the truck was eating up both lanes. So he had to either drive off the cliff or drive into the mountain. So he hit the side of the mountain. My sister hit the dash, went into a coma. My mother got so sick because she was pregnant with me that she ended up like going to the hospital and saying, just take this child out of me. I was 3 months premature when they pulled me out, but she said she was so sick and I was making her so sick. She said, this baby's got to come out. So they said she'll probably have brain damage when we pull her out by force. So they did. They pulled me out. I was real tiny, maybe 3 pounds. They put me in an incubator. And, I can remember being in an incubator.
You can remember that?
Absolutely. Yes.
How's that even possible?
I remember it. I remember. That's why when I was told I was in an incubator, I said, oh my God, I remember that. I totally do. I remember nurses, women in white. And the other thing, as a child, I do remember I would watch my mother's eyes and I would see a half moon go across her eye. And then she would have this attack. And it was always, she would become violent. Like, she came after me with butcher knives and everything. And she'd tell me when I was little, she was going to slit my throat and kill me, and that I had demons, and I was forbade to look her in the eyes, like absolutely not allowed to look her in the eyes. And I remember sometimes when I stand along the side, I would look at her and I'd see her eye twitch, and then I'd see this half crescent moon go over her eye, and then she would get possessed.
So do you think that she was possessed, or she was a demonic entity or something herself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she used to, as a child, she mutilated animals. She would chop up kittens and hang them up like a butcher shop. She would want a chicken, so she would stick her hand in a chicken's hole and pull the chicken, kill the chicken for an egg. And of course, the egg probably broke. So her brothers and sisters, when I went to Spain, I was told that she was absolutely not right in her mind. But she went through the Spanish Civil War as a teenager. She was probably raped. But they said she was a very violent sibling, very violent. She would just... they said she didn't beat to discipline, she beat to kill. And when she pegged me out of she had 5 kids.
5 children, and you were all affected by this madness?
Yeah, everybody in a different way.
Everybody in a different way. But she sounds like a psychopath.
Yes, psychopath, absolutely. And she was a kleptomaniac. And I remember there was a few times she was in a store stealing a ham or something to feed us because we were very poor. And the police would be waiting at the register and she'd get arrested. And then she'd be gone for a while. And it was she probably got off because she was psychologically off. But again, when she'd come back, I don't know, they gave her meds or whatever, but and she registered me in school as a retarded child. So I started school with kids with Down syndrome. And she put me on laxatives, and I would be pooping all the time. And then I'd say, Mama, please, I don't want those. And she'd say, no, you need them. But it was just to the point where, I always had something in my pants, and in school, I remember the teacher used to take tights and clean underwear for me. And one time I was whipped from head to toe because my mother had whipped me with a belt all the way. I don't know how many times, but I was probably whipped 50, 60 times. And it was welted to the point where my neck, my arms, I had whip marks everywhere. And I remember they took my clothes off in the principal's office and I was naked and all these people were inspecting my body. Nothing ever happened. So what I'm assuming happened was maybe the authorities went to the house and my mother said it was my father. And that's the other traumatic thing that happened to me was my father was working in the kitchen remodeling. It was just this little tiny 700 square foot house, tiny. He was remodeling and all these 2x4s were laying around. And my mother comes in and he said, be careful because I don't want you tripping and falling on anything with nails sticking out. And that's exactly what happened. She tripped, fell, nail went right in her ass that was sticking out, a nail like that in a 2x4. And I was under the table watching. So I saw the whole thing play out. So she falls, she passes out. He takes her to the hospital. We're all in tow. And in the hospital, when she comes to, she starts telling everybody he beat her with the 2x4. And I'm screaming, saying, I saw it. That's not what happened. She fell on it. And they covered my mouth and took me away. So I watched my father get arrested, get a restraining order. That was probably one of the earliest traumatic things that scarred me deeply, to watch my father get taken away. And he was the love of my life. He was the only one that never laid a hand on me. And then
why was he even with this mad woman in the first place? Your mom.
Because she got pregnant with 4 of his children. She had another baby
Yeah, but
with
four, I mean, four, come on, one after the other. You have to stop at some point.
Yeah, and I did have a half brother from her first husband, which was killed in a car accident in Spain. But my father was the love of my life, and he was brilliant and just a good man. But I really think it was for us. He stayed for us, and I think he felt sorry for her. I think when you're stuck in a narcissistic relationship, they get you to where you, even no matter how brilliant you are, your mind is no longer your own. It is as though you've been bit by Dracula, you know. And I saw my father. He loved her to the very end. He was never, he died alone. He didn't remarry, and he was homeless, and he got tuberculosis. And he came to me 5 nights in my sleep, knocking on my window. And I would go to the window and I'd put my hand on the glass, and he'd peel his hand off the glass and wave goodbye. So after the 5th night, I went to the kitchen and I told my mother, Papa's dead or dying. And she said, oh, because she wasn't telling anybody. She knew he was dying in the hospital, but she didn't tell anyone. So then I asked her to take me to him. And I remember when she led me to the hospital, it was the county general, and there was a room there. And she said, I'm not going in, you go in. And I walked in, and there were all these cots lined up on 2 rows, and everybody was a skeleton. And I didn't recognize them. So I had to look at the clipboards on the end of the bed. And then I went to the very end, and there was a man naked with tubes in his back and his testicles hanging in between his thighs, because it was just a skeleton. And when I looked at the clipboard, that was my dad. And what was really strange was I couldn't even cry, because all I could think is that he'll never suffer again. Once this is over, he'll never suffer again. And I remember when he died within a day and a half. I remember standing next to his cot, and I was the only one there. Nobody else wanted to go. They said, what did he ever do for us? And I had my sister-in-law take me there. And I said on the side of his bed, I said, you'll never have to hurt again, Papa. And I took his cane that was hung on the cot, and I took it home, and it was the only thing I had. And my mother threw it away when I was at school. So that was, very devastating. Anything I ever loved, it was just taken away. I had a kitten, same thing. I was at school, and I loved this kitten so much. And then when I went to school and I came back, and the pound was taking my cat away, and I was running after it, and I never got my kitten back, my cat. It was already a year old. And there was another story that happened that my brother got a car, and it was a big, like sedan, like a 4-door sedan, a Buick. And he said, let's go to the state fair. And then everybody was piling in the car, and everybody was like happy and jovial and laughing. And they even invited the neighbor to come with her child. And so they put her in there. So the car was packed. I don't know, 8 people, maybe 9. And all of a sudden my mother says to me, well, go get my purse. I left it on the kitchen table. And I turn around to run back towards the house, and they took off. And I remember seeing the car taking off, and I was, this makes me cry. But I was running after the car, and I could hear them all laughing. And I stayed home alone all day. And I was just looking out the window, waiting for them to come back. And when they came back, it was later, and they had stuff, like little trinkets. And there was no regard for what they did. And that hurt more than the beatings. That hurt more than the beatings. Look at me. I'm sweating. I'm crying. Oh, I look like a drowned rat.
Oh.
But anyway, those are those moments that your brain gets hardwired from trauma. Watching your father get taken away. Watching your mother lose her mind.
And she was really deeply manipulative woman who could manipulate, well, just about everyone and everything around her. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, she was gorgeous. She had the cutest voice, just a sweet little feminine voice. She was so adorable when she wanted to be. And we loved her, believe it or not, even though she was a monster, we loved her.
It's like being Stockholm syndromed in a way, right?
Yeah. Yes. So
that you start loving your kidnapper or your
exactly.
torturer.
Yes.
I mean, how often did that go on? That torture that you endured, why did she beat you? When did it start?
It was every day. There wasn't
Every
a day.
day?
It was
Every
day.
single day?
Yeah. Yeah, but if it wasn't, like a full beating or something, like the knife, the butcher knife, she came at me 3 times with a butcher knife. To this day, I can't see a butcher knife. I have a hard time handling a butcher knife myself. But like slaps, pinches, throwing a hammer at your head or something. I mean, that was daily. I mean, it was insults daily. Like you'd say, I want to sleep at my girlfriend's house. And then she'd say, okay. And it was rare if you ever could. It was always the thing that got taken away. Well, you're not going. When I won the beauty pageant, believe it or not, I had to relinquish my title because she said, I'm not going to let you do it was the tool to hurt me. So I had to, the first runner-up ended up taking the title because I just wasn't allowed to make appearances. So it was just, I got in a play, same thing. The first thing I got to open this door because I'm sweating so much. Yeah, those are some of the events that just really stand up. But I mean, my sister broke my arm when she fell on it, broke it. And then I was screaming and my mother came running. She took my arm and she kept bashing it over my head saying, see, it's not broken. See, it's not broken. And of course I passed out. I don't know how many times she slammed it over my head, but she didn't take me to a hospital for about 3 days. And I ended up getting a fever. My arm swelled up the size of my thigh. My hand was turning black. And finally, when she took me to the hospital, they x-rayed my arm. And my doctor put me in a room by myself. And he showed me the x-ray. And he said, this is not a normal break. Tell me what really happened. And I said, my sister fell on my arm. And he goes, no, this is a multiple breaks. And I remember when he showed me the x-ray, it looked like splintered in every which direction. It was just splintered. To this day, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but you can see the tendon sticks out. See?
Really? Yes,
yeah,
I can see that.
Yeah. It's still deformed. Like, see, if you see this, I have nothing, but this one, it bubbles out. So
you're still kind of scarred from having those horrific experiences.
Yeah.
And how old were you at that time?
I was 10 when that happened. Yeah.
But why would she do this? I mean, of course, she's a psychopath, but this is her children.
Yeah, but a sick person doesn't know. Again, if they're being possessed by something, this entity is feeding off of the trauma. So the more they can traumatize someone, and I think that's why they use children in sacrificing and stuff, because they're innocent. So they got a very pure light, pure frequency, and it's a feeding frenzy for these entities.
Yeah, and obviously, I am going to ask you now. Do you think that your mom was part of a satanic cult or part of some elite circles or groups or part of a bloodline or something? This sounds a lot like what I have spoken to people about, because they were MK Ultra mind controlled victims as a child that were traumatized systematically in order to make those fragments of the mind and do the compartmentalization in order to traumatize them for mind control purposes.
She came from a peasant family in Spain. The family all worked for the railroad. I do know that there was a grandfather that was a pedophile. And I think when the Spanish Civil War went, I believe she was raped. So I think that she probably picked up some entities or something, or from birth, who knows? But no, I don't believe she was part of anything like that. But I do know she dabbled with the tarot and getting her fortune read. And, and in Spain, there was a very famous fortune teller. And she did tell her how many kids she was going to have and how,
So now we lost connection with Erika Nann, and this has been a really rough experience, even having her on the show because of all the technical problems. I don't know if she's gonna come back or if we have to continue another day or at a later time today. But she's certainly out at the moment. So let's see what's going to happen from here. Okay, so Erika, we had some problems the last time just before. We had some major problems when you were in your car and no internet connection, and everything was like really messing things up for us. But now you found a really good place and a very good spot for us to continue where we left off. And there was a very crucial point in your extraordinary story that we were just getting into there. So everything was like a little wild and you were in the car, but nice to see you back there, refreshed and happy, I hope.
God, I was so hot in the car. I mean, it was like 100, over 100 degrees, and it was, the humidity was like 8. And I was literally feeling the sweat dripping off my face during the interview. And I could feel I was flushed. Like my face was so red, like a tomato. So yeah, it probably wasn't my best look.
But you've gone through a lot of, I guess, what do you call it? Internal work, or work on yourself, within yourself, from going from being a model, being very concerned with your looks. And you've also talked about having had plastic surgery, and also the path of going away from that and actually trying to get rid of the plastic surgery. So that's also a very, that's also hard work, from going from being really vain and having to live that Hollywood lifestyle, and then to be at a farm and at a ranch that you are now, and being more, as we say, centered and not so concerned about yourself. Isn't that how you have described it, actually?
Yeah, and I think, again, when you're hardwired as a child, being told you're ugly and stupid face and idiot. I mean, I remember when my mother would always say that my sister, that's a year and a half older than me, when she would say you could put a rag on her and she'll make it look like $100 dress, and you can put $100 dress on you and you make it look like a rag. It was stuff like that just, I remember like freezing and feeling something inside of me like, okay, so it's all about being beautiful. And it was interesting because even in my 20s, when, okay, I learned to do my makeup, I learned to be poised, I learned how to smile and work the camera and all of that. But it was almost as though I was doing it like a dog that's been trained to be obedient for a bone, because I really thought that that was success in life. You see models on the cover and you see beautiful actors being interviewed by Johnny Carson or something, and everybody's like, wow, look at that figure, look at that dress. And I mean, I remember being really awestruck by Raquel Welch, when I saw her in that bikini, and Brooke Shields. Oh my God, Brooke Shields was like my idol when I was 13. I just, because she was a little bit younger than me, but I was in love with her. And then, probably more recently, you see Angelina Jolie and you go, oh my God, look at that beautiful mouth. Look at, So then you subconsciously start trying to look like certain people, because you never think you're pretty enough. You never think you're good enough. And I think that it goes the same. You're a musician, you get it. I mean, you're singing, and then you change your singing style because you think, well, this song didn't hit very well, or this one didn't grab the audience, so I'm going to try to modify how I sing. And it's really hard, because I really admire people that can just find their niche and stick to it. And I'm assuming with you being an entertainer and a singer, you've probably experienced all the same stuff.
Absolutely. That's also a long story, but I've been performing for over 20 years. So, and more actually, and done so many different styles, but that's, of course, that's a whole other story. But I know about the business, and I know about hard work and doing many different genres. And so in that way, I can relate certainly to what that whole business is all about.
Yeah, but I do regret the surgeries. I mean, now I really see how my mouth has been deformed, and like the fillers in my face have dropped, because what happens when you're young, all these fillers and stuff, your skin is tight. Your skin is tight in your lips, so they can put stuff in there, but the skin is so tight that it holds a pretty form. But like, again, I'm 3 months away from 60 and the skin starts getting kind of crepey, you know? And recently I went to a dermatologist.
But not really. I mean, you look amazing for almost 60, and nobody would ever dream that you were actually hitting that big number there.
Thank you. I think I actually would have looked better if I never would have touched my face, though. I honestly think I would have aged better without touching my face. I think that's the thing, is I appreciate that you say I look good, but my regret is that I don't have the face I was born with, that I messed with it.
Well, we can see, of course, that you had the lips done, and so many people have their lips done these days, and Botox and stuff. But I mean, why the lips? Because you had really not. We've seen pictures here and old video also. I mean, you had very nice lips.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna be very honest. I swear this on my life, my limbs. I remember so much when I would get beat, my mom's lips would get real thin and tight, and I would stare at her lips because I hated them. And they would get so tight that all you could see was her teeth. And she would look like she had rabies. And I remember I would see my mouth, you know, I would see her in my mouth. And I thought, if ever there's a surgery to get my lips plump, I'm going to do it, you know. And that was really something really deeply put within me. It was very, very strange. And I'll even say something else. How deep it goes. I wanted to emulate my father. Everything he did, my father would get up and he was born in 1899.
In 1889.
1889, because he was born in Germany. And what happened was the Hall of Records in New Jersey burned down. And then a friend in Germany, in Hamburg, said, go to New Jersey and say you were born there. And while you're at it, shave off 10 years of your life because it will give you longevity with work. So my father's birth certificate says he was born in 1899 in New Jersey, but he actually was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1889.
But that's remarkable. I mean, that he must have been, really old when he had you, because my great-grandfather was born in 1893.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's like my great-grandfather. I mean, I know there's an age difference also between you and me, but still it sounds remarkable that your dad must have been quite old when you were born.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do the math. He would have been 72 because I was born in 62.
Wow.
So, yeah. And so, and my mother was born in 1922. My mother went through the Spanish Civil War. My father went through, they both went through the Depression and everything, but my father was on his own at the age of 10. And my mother was never educated. She never went to school. Her father worked for the railroad. They lived in a little shack with dirt floors. And when it would flood, the whole floor would flood out and snakes would come in. And so my mother really hated the country. So it was interesting that she always had dreams of being famous, and she was a beautiful singer and she was gorgeous, but her dreams never came true. And I think a lot of her hatred for me later, as I got older, was that I pursued it. I pursued her dream. And maybe I thought by making it that she would then respect me somehow, but it really did the opposite. So
there was jealousy there.
Oh God, yeah. And my sisters too. I mean, and I think that I remember when I was like 14, I was teaching roller skating. I've always been a really good athlete. Anything I did, especially with things on my feet, like skis, roller skating, ice skating, any of that, I just took to it so quickly. And horseback riding. I mean, I was really young. I jumped on a horse and I could just ride. It didn't matter galloping or whatever. I wasn't afraid at all. So I really, really excelled at anything physical. But I think, again, it was a way to prove myself, because I remember if somebody dared me to jump off the roof of the house, I would. I mean, if somebody dared me to jump like 30 steps at school. I would just take a running start and jump. None of the boys would do it, but I would do it.
Wow.
And my feet would hurt.
Like a daredevil somehow.
Oh yeah. But again, I think it was a part of a death wish. And I'll tell you 2 stories because I was so abused, but it's interesting because all I wanted was to be accepted in my family. I wanted that so much. And I finally released it. I mean, recently, I think more than anything recently, but you know, even as a child, my mother was drowning once. We went to a lake and I was very young and I was probably, my guess is 8 or 9. And I was a great swimmer. And I saw my mother with my brother on her shoulders and they walked into the lake and then she just dropped off and she was gone. And I knew she was drowning because my mother could not swim. And I just fearlessly was screaming like, oh my God, mama's gone, mama's gone. And I just dove underwater and I went as far as I could and I dove underwater and she was kicking and flailing. And what I did was I dove under her feet and she was kicking me everywhere, but I let her get up on my back and shoulders and I was trying to push her and I was in the reeds. I was down in the muck, but she was almost knocked me out because she was just going mental underwater and my brother was on top of her, but she got enough to where they could see her arms above water. So then they saved her and my brother. And then a second time, I was even younger. I was about 6 or 7. And my mother, somebody told her, I think my brother had worms or something, you know, how they're always playing outside in the dirt. Well, I don't know. He must have like had them in his, you know, when he went to the bathroom, my mother saw him. So she told somebody and they gave her turpentine. So she takes this turpentine and she gives them to the 3 of us were home. There, you know, nobody else from the family was there. And she gives my brother some turpentine. She takes some turpentine and there was just a little bit left over and she gave it to me. And within, I want to say within minutes, they were both like just passed out. Like they didn't throw up, but they were just laid down on the sofa and they were knocked out. And I remember I didn't feel well, but I knew something was wrong and I'd never used the phone. Again, I couldn't spell, I couldn't read. I didn't know how to tell time. I was way behind because I was raised with Down syndrome kids in school. So I was really, really, really far behind. But somehow I knew something was wrong. And I didn't even know anything about dialing 911. So what I did was there was a family phone book, a black family phone book. And I remember I opened it and I knew my sister's girlfriend's name was Lori Civical. And I knew her father was a policeman. So I remember just flipping through every page and I was not feeling well, but I said, I've got to call that before I pass out. And I found the number and I remember I copied the number and I dialed it back in the day when it was rotary. And then thank God, Mr. Civical answered. And I said, I think we're dying. And he says, what do you mean? I said, I don't know. My mom gave us something. And he said, who? And I go, herself, my brother and me. And he said, I'll be right over. I'm calling an ambulance. So an ambulance and he got to the house around the same time. It must have been within 10 minutes. And then they got rushed to the hospital and I did too, but I didn't need my stomach pumped. I didn't get enough. So I came out of it. But they said if they wouldn't have pumped my mother and my brother's stomach within the hour, they would have been dead.
Because she gave you all turpentine.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Recently, I heard that, for example, somebody like Dr. Andrew Kaufman, who's been very out there in the past few years because of what's happened in the world, he actually said that some form of turpentine, I'm not an expert, so I don't know how it could be used, but could actually be very good for cleansing the body somehow. So that's what I heard.
You know, it probably is, but my mother probably thought the worms, like I'm going to really, you know, give enough to kill the worms. So there's probably a fine line where it becomes toxic, you know.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, but it was interesting because those 2 times that I basically saved their lives, I never got a pat on the back. I was never told I was good. It was nothing. It was just like totally forgotten. But I never forgot it because it was traumatic. It was traumatic.
And it was worse for you than the other kids, your siblings.
Yeah, I was pegged. I mean, it was strange. My oldest sister did get beatings. And I mean, there was always drama. I mean, no matter what, there was always drama. It didn't matter what what was going on. It always turned into some horrible, and I mean, I could probably tell you,
What happened when she went crazy?
Okay, I'll tell you the very first one that I remembered at 5 years old, watching and witnessing, that put me in a state of shock and horror. And then I'll tell you the last one, when I finally just left home, because I knew, something horrible was going to happen. But the very first time, we were very poor, and she bought a T-bone steak for everyone. And there was my oldest brother was no longer living at home, but there was my two sisters and my younger brother and myself and my mother. So there was 5 of us living in this tiny little house. And she bought a T-bone steak. She fried it up with some lard, and she threw some salt on it. And that was it. We didn't have anything else, no potatoes, no nothing. It was just a T-bone steak. And we were like wild animals. She was trying to cut one piece at a time. And we were sitting there with a fork, just waiting to stab it. Like, that one's mine. No, you got the last one. That one's mine. And we were already starting to argue over these little pieces of steak. And my mother's cutting them as fast as she can. And then all of a sudden, when we all got a piece, and my poor mother, I don't even think she got a piece. We all started fighting about who's going to suck on the bone. And then we all were just going, no, you got the bone last time, I get the bone this time. And we would actually rip it apart until you get to the marrow and suck the marrow out. I mean, that's how hungry we were. But I remember there was so much bickering that she finally you could see her starting to get more and more nervous. And she just took one clean swoop, and she took everything off the table. And then she just stood up, and then she's just pounding her head so hard, so hard, you start seeing it bleed. And then she just passed out right in front of us. And we're at the kitchen table, and she's just on the floor flat out. And my oldest sister was 10. And I remember she gets on her knees, and she's trying to revive her. And I'm just staring at this whole thing. And my little brother's probably 3.5. I'm 5. My other sister's 6.5. And I remember we're just these kids all in the kitchen looking at my mom. Her forehead's broken and it's bleeding. And then I remember my oldest sister called my brother, my half brother, who was 15 years older than me. And then he rushed there, and I believe they took her to the hospital. I just don't remember any. I only remember seeing her on the floor. And then there was another time same thing, lost it. And she actually went running into traffic. And she's having this fit, trying to get hit by cars. And because we lived off of a busy street. And that particular time, I don't know how we got her back in the house, but I remember somebody called an ambulance, and they took her away in a straitjacket. I mean, there's so many stories. And the very last time before I left home, I was hanging out with a girlfriend, and she didn't like her for some reason. I never could figure it out. And what happened was I was hanging out having Taco Bell, and I said, listen, my mom doesn't like you, so drop me off on the other street so she doesn't see you. She's going to leave for work soon, so let's just wait here, watch her car leave out of the garage. And so I see her car leave, but see, my girlfriend's car was orange. So I think my mother must have saw a bit of the orange, because what happened was, as she turned around to then bring me to the alley to drop me off, somehow my mother went back in the garage and closed the door. So my mother never left. And all of a sudden she's in the alley dropping me off. And also the garage door opens, and I see my mother coming out, running right for the windows. And I said, close your window, close your window. And she managed to get my girlfriend's head, and she's pulling her hair. And I just said, I'm running for the house. I said, just take off, it doesn't drag her. It doesn't matter, because she was terrifying when she was like that. So I ran in the house, and I went in the bathroom, and I pulled out the drawer because the lock was busted on the door. So I just pulled out the drawer. And then of course she runs in after me within a minute. She's behind me. And then I heard her in the kitchen getting a hammer or something. And that's exactly what she started, pounding the door and breaking the door. And she made a hole in the door. And then she's swinging the hammer through the hole. And then I'm grabbing the hammer. And then she's pulling my arm back and forth through this hole. And I'm my arm's getting cut up. But I managed to pull the hammer out of her hands. So then she's going back to the kitchen to get something else. And then I run in the bedroom. And I pulled the bed in front of the door. And then I hear her coming back, and I knew she had the butcher knife. I don't know why, but I just knew she had the butcher knife. That was always like the last resort, is I'm going to kill you with the butcher knife. And she did 3 times come at me with a butcher knife. And this time I said, she's going to kill me. So in the bedroom, I remember my feeling was already, I was out of body, because your adrenaline gets to such a point that you go numb. And then I remember just pushing the bed away, and I was supposed to be at work. You know, I was already running late for work. I worked at the Wiener Schnitzel, and I just pushed the bed away, and I opened the door, and there she had the knife. And I just said, kill me, just kill me, get it over with. I don't want to live no more, just kill me. And when I was looking her straight in the eye, I didn't feel anything anymore. I wasn't even afraid, nothing. And then instead of killing me, she drops a knife, she turns to the door frame, and she just starts bashing her head into the door frame, like a robot, just over and over. And she split her forehead again, and she fell over. And I'm already at this place of so much abuse for so many years that I just walked over her body and I went to work. I mean, I said, I hope she dies. I really got to that point. I didn't help her. I didn't call 911. I didn't, nothing. So I'm at work, and my brother shows up at my job to say, hey, we've been robbed and Mama was attacked. And all of a sudden, when he sees me turn around, he sees my whole face is swollen. My arm is all bloody. It's been wrapped, but he knows that the confrontation was me. And I didn't even know my face had been hit. I have no memory of my face being hit. I only remember running from the car, going in the bathroom, I have no memory of her getting my face. But I had a busted lip, my face was swollen, and I remember the arm. But anyway, then at that point I had to leave home. I was not welcome to stay in the home because she was in intensive care.
Carrie's mother, it makes her look like a saint almost. Carrie's mother in the movie Carrie by Stephen King, if you remember that film.
Yeah, it's very when you experience something like that firsthand, it scary doesn't even cover it. You're literally you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't concentrate. At school, I remember I couldn't read out loud. I couldn't read, even in high school. And I remember there'd be kids next to me trying to feed me the words, because I would literally get like, it was just, nothing would come out. I was so horrified.
You weren't even able to speak, actually. You had to learn everything afterwards and as you went along.
No, I could have a conversation with someone like the way we're talking now. I had no problem with that. It was when I was made to read something, I couldn't read the words. I couldn't pull them off the page. They wouldn't come out. And if we had an assignment, let's say, read this history, I would read a paragraph, and I'm not exaggerating, 20 times. I had no idea what I read. I would see the words and I read them in my mind, and I had no comprehension. I remember that so well. I could not comprehend anything, nothing. So needless to say, I failed miserably, and in school, how
you were totally traumatized, and that's what trauma does to people,
I couldn't learn. Absolutely.
These are mind control techniques, really, and maybe it wasn't organized. I think we talked about that earlier, that maybe it wasn't orchestrated mind control that she was inflicting on you, but it's actually what you went through, and really in a very, very scary way. I mean, more so than most people can even comprehend themselves. You've also said that she would drag you around by your hair.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember one time my sister was supposed to pick me up at the roller rink at midnight, and she says, yeah, I'll be there, I'll pick you up, because she was going to go dancing or something. And apparently she decided to just go home and go to bed. So there I am with my girlfriend, who also worked at the roller rink, and it's midnight and they're closing everything down, and there's like 5 workers. And I finally had to just dial my home number again, because that was our ride home. And when my mother answered the phone, she said, oh, I'll be there. And it was a weekend, so it wasn't my mother always worked graveyard shift, but this weekend, of course, she was home. Let me tell you, so when she busted through those doors, my God, it was such a nightmare, because I remember I was sitting on my knees and she came through these double doors and behind me, and she grabbed my head and just ripped me back. And I mean, I was like a crab going backwards, and she's just yanking my hair and everybody's gasping.
This was in front of everybody, on display for everybody to see how she treated you.
And I worked there. I was humiliated. I was like, oh my God, you know. And I was 14 when that happened, 13, 14. And I remember all of a sudden she had a big black Grand Prix, and Marla, I just said my girlfriend's name. I'm trying not to mention names, but so my girlfriend was with me, and all of a sudden she had to get in the car with me. And I remember she said, I'm not sitting next to your mother, you know. So I got in the middle, and then she was by the door, and I could just see her gripping the door, like white knuckling the door, and her little feet were hitting the floor. Like, she was trembling. She had never seen anything like this. I knew, and I never told her I was abused. So I could tell she was traumatized. And boy, let me tell you something, my mother must have been going, it was the winter, and she was probably going 100, 110 with snow on the ground, which is fatal. I mean, you hit a patch of ice, you'll spin out. I mean, she was driving like a maniac. And I remember, oh God, when we got to her house, I was so embarrassed. I mean, I was just like, next time I saw her in school, and she was like, your mother's crazy. And she said, you know, my father's a policeman. My mother's an opera singer. She says, we've talked about it. We'll go through legal ways and we'll adopt you. But I was just horrified. I was like, no, when I'm 18, I'll be out of here, you know? And I was afraid to live with anybody else's family. I was uncomfortable in other people's homes. I was really like.
You were more comfortable at home in that hail?
No, I mean, it's hard to explain. No, I didn't want to be home either, but I didn't want to be in somebody else's home. I don't know. It's like, I felt like.
Was it some kind of Stockholm syndrome that you were actually suffering from, which is when somebody who's been kidnapped suddenly sympathize and with their kidnapper?
No, I mean, I can honestly say I didn't want to be there. I was already suicidal. And I became bulimic when my father died. And I told you the story with my mother, how in the last video, how my mother set up my father. So when my father was gone, I remember just sitting in the living room, and this ties into entities, how I felt an entity go into my body, a dark one. I felt it. It went right into my solar plex, and it felt like you know, similar to a punch, but a little different, almost as though it's sucked in, like a vacuum.
Like an archon being, is that what you mean?
Well, I can tell you exactly what I visualized it as, because when I saw the movie Ghostbusters, I said it looked like the Blob in Ghostbusters. Very similar to the Blob, just a big mouth, or Jabba the Hutt, something similar to that. And very parasitical. And I remember, because I never had an eating problem, I was 98 pounds, but I was very thin. I was, you know, an athlete. And all of a sudden I just couldn't stop eating. Suddenly I just wanted to go to the kitchen, just wolf anything I could down.
And how old were you at the time? 17, you started to become bulimic, and you started to eat a lot, overeat, and then you would throw it up.
Yes. And then it gave me a very euphoric feeling, but it wasn't even like eating something that tasted good. I could eat something in the trash, like old stale bread. It didn't matter. I just needed to put anything in to fill me, and then anything to throw up. And what was really horrible is you hide the disease. So I started like taking little plastic bags anywhere with me to throw up in the plastic bag, because I couldn't leave anything inside of my body. And my mother found one of the plastic bags once. I had hid it somewhere, and she found it, and she came to school walking around with this plastic bag full of vomit.
No.
Yeah. And she would go in the grocery store. Yeah. And in the grocery store, sometimes she'd be shopping, and she'd just talk to some woman and say, yeah, do you know my daughter eats the food and throws it up? You know, here I'm working to support and everything. And she's eating the food and throwing it up. And I totally get that. But there was no responsibility on the abuse. This was like, I used to grind my teeth. My sister used to wake me up and say, you're grinding your teeth again. I mean, I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was mashing my teeth, like where they would just ground down, especially this tooth here. It's just ground down to nothing, because it was like that grind, until there's just nothing left of the tooth. And I remember being insomniac, and I had dark circles under my eyes. And, so the bulimia just gave me like this place to just put all that energy. Like when I was eating, I wasn't thinking of anything else. I just was thinking of how good it tastes to eat and fill myself up. And at that point, I was already working at a place called Poppin' Fresh Pies. It was like a little restaurant, kind of like a Denny's or something, but they served all these kind of pies. And at night, they'd have us throwing away tons of pies. So instead of throwing away, I'd be like taking scoops of every single pie, custard, strawberry, chocolate cream silk or whatever it was called. And I mean, I was just like stuffing myself. And then of course I gained like 15 pounds. And that's when everybody started making fun of me, because my little thin body started getting a little bit curvy. And I think I remember now the moment that it flipped. It wasn't just on top of my father dying, but there was one moment where somebody said, oh, would you go outside and get that thing? And they were all sitting, there was a picture window in the kitchen. And I went outside, and when I came in, everybody was laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And they said, Tony, our oldest brother, he goes, Tony's wife has already had 3 kids and your ass is bigger than hers. And they were all laughing, like jolly big laugh. And suddenly I loved Amazons. I had an Amazon poster over like in my bedroom somewhere, an Amazon with 2 saber-toothed tigers, and she was big and thick, and I thought she was gorgeous. But as soon as they laughed at me having a thick body, it just hit me. So the combination of that, my father dying, problems in school, blah, 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 so it kind of just all fell into place. It was like the perfect storm.
So for how long were you bulimic or throwing up? I mean, for how long did you actually throw up and have that disease? And can you ever cure it, really?
I had it 21 years. And there was, when I hit 38, I got divorced, and I just said, I'm in a lousy marriage with a cheater, and I need to kick this because it's going to kill me. There was at one point I got down to 87 pounds and I had no white blood count cell. I was just skinny and sickly and weak and anemic, and I knew that I had to stop. Wasn't while I was married that I got that thin. I got that thin when I was probably about 18 when I first started. I didn't know how to.
So you were anorexic as well?
I don't think I was ever anorexic. I think I was totally bulimic, but I just wouldn't leave any food in my stomach.
Okay, so everything you threw up. Yep.
And it was when I got divorced, I just had to retrain myself. So I remember I thought, I'm going to empty out the whole kitchen, and I'm going to just keep raw almonds in there and water and just like 3 things that I know I can eat for the day. And that's it. I'm going to totally retrain myself. And I remember I'd go in a grocery store and I'd literally feel sweat beating on my neck because I would see the candy bars and stuff. And I would, like an addict, I would just start feeling the body temperature going up. And I thought, I can't, if I don't kick it now, I'll never kick it. I have to control this. And it was really interesting because at one point I felt a roar of a lion, like in this whole part of my body. I felt like a roar. And then I felt this entity pop out of me. And it was when I really made the decision, I am not doing this. It's like this entity couldn't feed off of me anymore. And the interesting thing is my totem is a mountain lion. I mean, and I didn't realize, I didn't put that together till way later, that roar of the lion was my totem animal.
So do you think that having an eating disorder in that way, being bulimic or anorexic, do you think that could be like, being possessed by some kind of entity? And do you think that's a truth for a lot of people?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Any addiction. I don't care if it's gambling, sex, food, money, power, killing people. My younger brother, I remember he started hurting animals when he was young. And like I told you, my mother used to hurt animals. So I remember like I found a little nest of birds and I was so excited because these little birds were tweeping and they were in a brick and I was so excited. And then when I showed him, first thing he did when I turned around, he got a stick and he started mashing them. And I remember it traumatized me. It traumatized me. I was screaming. I remember I was going up to the brick and I said, no, I can't see it. I can't see it. And I walked away. And I told him years later, that traumatized me. And he said, I don't ever want to talk about it again. You bring up the past too much. And to this day, he doesn't talk to me. This is a brother that judged me so much. I remember when he wanted to be an actor, he went to California. I got him in the union. I used all my connections, got him in the union. I did extra work with him and he got Taft-Hartley, got him his SAG card, got him an agent, got him pictures, got his resume. He goes out on a few auditions and because he didn't get the auditions, he got, oh, F this. And I was like, well, you know how hard I worked to get all that? And I gave it to you just like that. And it never got brought up, So I think, and he ended up with a horrible gambling addiction, horrible, because he always had anger issues, very angry.
Maybe he was traumatized as well by your mother.
Absolutely. He was not well, I think traumatized, but my older brother used to pick on him because he was jealous. There was like this, almost like an Oedipus thing with my older brother and my mother.
It's been so dysfunctional, your entire family history there, with all of you.
Mm-hmm. I was getting beat by my oldest sister, my oldest brother, my half brother, and my mother. But then the other sister that was real pretty, she would set me up, So like, for instance, when I won the beauty pageant, I was supposed to do this big conference for all the new contestants. And I said, would you take me to the conference? It's in Menominee Falls. And she goes, yeah. So I get up in the morning, I get ready, and I said, we got to leave by such and such a time. And all of a sudden, 6:30 comes around, I'm ready. I got my banner on, my dress, my crown, my makeup and everything. And I nudge her to get her up. And she's like, I'm not taking you. I said, but you have to take me. I have to get there. This is like really important. It's going to, I mean, you have no idea how important this is. Like, I have to be there. And so then I wake up my mother, and then my mother just starts screaming at me saying, we are sleeping, leave us alone. And I remember I went in the basement and I cried so hard. I cried so hard. I remember just all my makeup just dripping down my face, and it just had the banner on, and it makes me cry now because it was such a dream to win it and to be so cruel. I got a call from the state director when I was already supposed to be there. And she's like, why didn't you tell me? I would have picked you up. I said, because my sister, sorry, God, it's coming up for me now.
Everything that everything you're telling here is horrendous. So just
yeah,
just get it out, really.
Yeah, it's just funny. I'm so good at talking, and I'm letting myself feel it. And the problem is when you feel it, you're living it again. Anyway, okay, let me just compose myself a second, because I'm sharing stuff that really hurts.
I totally understand. This is like really, it's just an emotional hell, this, right?
Yeah.
And did you ever get therapy for any of this?
Yeah, I went to therapy, and what I found was that the therapists were watching the clock more than really caring about helping you. Because I remember one time I started really, it was during my marriage, and I just knew I was married to a complete narcissist user, didn't love me at all. It was just all so obvious. And I stayed in it for 9 years, and it was really just a very unhealthy relationship. It was all about him,
And did you have many or several relationships that kind of were similar?
Yeah, the serious ones. I think I've had four serious relationships, and everyone was just as bad, if not worse. They like just people with addictions. And, you know, the first husband, I mean, I remember my brother saying he was cheating on you the whole time he was on a TV show in Mexico. You do know that. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that, you know. And then there was another guy that, you know, I almost don't even want to give these guys energy, because I think it's obviously my brain got wired to not recognize what love was. The really good guys that wanted to love me, as soon as I saw that look on their face and this compassion and empathy, they scared me.
So you did experience people, guys that actually wanted to love you, wanted to be with you, for you, and actually had real emotions and feelings for you.
Yep, I ran. Yep, I ran, because I think part of me, you know, you never feel good enough. You always feel like the broken people are going to get you, you know, and you just feel like, I want another broken person, because they're the only person that's going to really have lived what I've lived, and we're going to help each other because we come from the same broken place, you know. And it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. Now, I'm a really level-headed person. I always was, even as a young one. I don't know why, but I could just really look at, maybe it was that angel coming to me when I was 7, but something really gave me some sort of groundedness to never touch drugs, to not drink, to not fool around, to not lie, steal, cheat. I never cheated on my husband. I never cheated on any of the people that I was serious with, ever. Even now, I've been celibate for so many years, because I just look at that energy as something so sacred. And what's interesting is the times that I was molested, it seemed like the person that was, you know, because I really am a big believer in people having possessions. I think almost every person does, if they have any form of addiction or anger or depression or jealousy, or they're harboring some sort of little entities. And the thing is that when you're young and you're innocent, I'm not saying that young and innocent kids can't be possessed, because they can. But for the most part, that's why they're used so much in ceremony, because it's that pure light and energy.
And at that time, you didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, right? When you started in Hollywood, that also things were happening there. And also what we know to be true about these satanic rituals happening in these elite circles and in castles around the world. We also hear about these shapeshifters, and people have seen some of these top elitists actually shapeshift. And that's not only David Icke talking about that. A lot of people have talked about that. You even know things about that, or was made aware something about this. Maybe you can share some of that, your knowledge about whether or not this is actually true.
Okay, well, what I can tell you is, while I was pursuing the career, I had none of that. But afterward, I can say that I started really actually seeing and recognizing the people that were involved, that were getting ahead, that were playing the game, that got, because I was in a master's class with Ivana Chubbuck, which, you know, all the big people are in there, you know, I don't even want to name names, but the very, very top actors. And Ivana used to tell me, you know, Erika, you're just as good as anybody else. Just give up the horse, give up the ranch, and focus 1,000,000% on this career, and you'll have it. But I didn't want to do that. My horse was my family. All the ranch animals I had, they were all my family. The only family I've really ever known. But that's one of the things that you have to, it seems, to make it, you have to give everything up. You have to walk in and say, I'm giving myself to this career, that this is it. I'm just giving myself to that degree where you live, breathe, and eat it.
And did Ivana Chubbuck actually say that to you?
No. She never brought up any of that. All I can say is that there was just this vibe that, like, you have to be so hungry and so Ivana's an awesome woman. I love her. She's awesome.
Yeah, I know lots of people who attended her courses and know her.
I love her. She's like a mom, you know, and she loves everyone. They're like her little brood of chicks. She's awesome. So no, Ivana's awesome. But I would just say that once you enter that threshold, and like I would say that she helps you blossom like a beautiful rose. But then what happens is you're this beautiful rose and you're going into this industry with all this beautiful talent that she helped bring out of you. But then what's on the other side is when they see that beautiful rose, it's people say, I want more of that. I want more of that. I want more of that until, and then, you know, I mean, I remember I auditioned for Coppola's Dracula for one of the brides, and I actually got cast. But then I didn't have that Transylvanian accent good enough, you know, so they cast someone from Transylvania, you know. It was one of those things that they wanted they wanted a woman, a gal, a model from Transylvania. So then they took it and I didn't get it. But then when I saw the movie, I saw these brides eating a baby. And I thought to myself, I don't care if it's simulated. In the astral world, simulated. That's why these games that people play, Game Boys and movies, like if you're watching horror movies and stuff, that energy, to me, it's the same. It's the same. I don't care if someone's joking or laughing or, of course, the playing out of murdering someone to talking about murdering someone, two different things, yes. But the energy, the universe feels the energy. It's like saying I want this. The energy.
Well, movies, it's make believe. It's not real, but yet we do hear that some top people, certainly not all, but some, they really do have to compromise everything they stand for in their integrity and perhaps get involved in these satanic circles. And my question was, how did you become aware of what was actually going on? Also about, let's say, off-world beings that possess some really high-level so-called humans that may not be humans here on Earth. What can you share about that?
Well, again, I can only really speak from my personal experience. I got out of the acting world far before, but you know, with my CBS contract, being married to someone that was obsessed with making it and playing the game, and I can tell you one thing. With my ex, I know that, and I'm not going to say he did or he didn't, because I could never prove it, because I never went into his computer, but the FBI showed up at our door and said that there was child porn on the computer and that they'd been watching him. And I remember just looking at him and said, he wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. But you know, I remember he was doing a movie in Bulgaria and he was saying like something, like brought him a really young girl to the hotel or something. And I said, well, what did you do? Because we were already in the process of divorce. So it's like whatever he did was his business. But the fact that he was sharing that they would bring him a young gal, you know, and I don't know, maybe I was naive. I don't know. But I mean, now looking later, there's a certain thing of like bisexuality, orgies, which my ex was trying to get me in all that, the orgies and the group sex. And, you know, and he talked me into sex with a female and I regretted it. I didn't like it. It didn't feel right to me. It just felt dirty, like a part of my soul had a smudge. And for me, I don't judge anybody who does it. Let people do whatever they're going to do. But all I know is that every time I've ever walked that line of nudity in movies, a simulated sex scene or something, because I think there's 2 or 3 movies where I show my breast, and I think 2 movies where it's a simulated sex scene. Both times, but the sex scene, I was lied to. They said, oh, you won't see anything. It will be a side profile. It'll be edited really nice. It won't look like bad at all. You don't have to worry about it, you know. Man, let me tell you something. When all of a sudden you see the actual film and you go, oh, mother of God, holy shit. You know, it looks about as close to a porno as it can, you know, I mean, without penetration or anything, but you know, then you go, okay, now I just screwed up my career, like 2 of these movies and that's it, I'm done, you know. And it changes, like the whole energy and the whole dynamic changes. And it's almost as though somebody might say you jinxed yourself, but I look at it like you made a choice to do something. And now the lessons that come from that are going to show up. But you can feel entities on the set. You can feel entities in the director. You can feel entities on anybody who's lusting for you when they see you're naked. I mean, you can feel this energy, just dynamic shift. And suddenly it's almost as though there's a spiritual feeding frenzy in the room. And these things are feeding off of you because you have this bit of naivete. And especially when you first do it, you know, it's like virginity, you know, I'm convinced that these spirit beings need to eat energy. So they're going to try to find the purest form or the most intense form or whatever it is. And I'm sure when we die and we're in the spirit realm, we can see energy a lot more clearly, like the way animals can. But I think Hollywood is just loaded, as is Vegas or, you know, these brothels or anything. I mean, if you're real sensitive, you're going to be able to feel, even if you're listening to music that's got a real low frequency. And think about it. Think about when people used to go to war. What did they do? The tribal drums just beating until people got in like this trance state to go kill. And I think that there's just something about like a rhythm that keeps going. And it's interesting too, because I think about 4th of July and bombs and atom bombs, how they say it tears thin veils in reality. So when they're tearing these veils with sound or bombs or sonic booms, what is slipping in through those veils? You know, there's just so much we don't know.
But yeah, but many actors do like nude scenes or kissing scenes, and then it's just, you know, that day's work, and then they don't really take it home with them, so to speak, and don't feel that they've compromised something within themselves. You know, that's, you know, that it goes with the job, so to speak, for a lot of actors.
Well, you're exchanging astral cords. They're connecting. Doesn't matter if there's penetration or not. Even some people won't hug because these cords connect. And I know to some people, they might listen to this and think this is crazy talk. But again, energy is very like static, you know, static electricity.
Yeah, but isn't it a beautiful thing to hug? If you've got your energy, a good energy around you, and you hug people with the intention of giving them a warm embrace with good energy, then that's good. I mean, if you receive something bad back, you don't have to receive it, right? You can kind of shield yourself. I hope. I mean, we've been hugging a lot of people.
You're right. Yeah. But, you know, I've gone in a room sometimes and I've felt something very dark in the room. And all of a sudden I'll sit there and I'll just kind of go, whoop, and I find the person or the thing or whatever it is, or there might be a portal in the room and you can just feel it. I mean, so.
But what do you think about these revelations that came out that some of these top elitists are not really human?
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I believe it. I believe that, for one, anything that came from Egypt or Sumeria or whatever preceded that, because I think that this planet has shifted many times. And when you see these places like Costa Mesa, and it's this big flat plateau, and then you look at it, that was a tree. You know, there's petrified rock all from end to end, and which is petrified wood. It's not even rock, it's wood. So these were trees, and you think, okay, so there were titans here, and the titans were like the size of God knows what. And then Egypt, you see these 45-foot entrances or 35, 25, 15, you know, so obviously there were giants that were enormous. And I think that this planet has shifted again and again and again, its axis, and I think, or its poles. And I think that these beings either went underground, because I am a believer that there is life underground. And I think that's why there's always been this fascination with the North and South poles to find the entrances. And, you know, when I see movies like, you know, Lord of the Rings and all that, I believe that this is not I really believe that those are other realms. And I remember there was a young man that I dated in high school, and he raised canaries in his basement. And I remember he told me that under the stairwell, and he was afraid to tell me at first. He said, "You won't believe me." And I said, "I'll believe you. I'll believe you." He goes, "Well, I've never told anyone, and I'm almost afraid to tell someone." I said, "Well, tell me. And he goes, "Little gnomes, like little elves, come from under the stairwell, and they come and get my bird seed, and then they leave. And I see them with little sacks, and they leave, and then like half my bird seed's gone. But they always leave enough for the birds, but then they leave." And he said he just got used to them coming and going. And it was very, very interesting to me. I knew he wasn't lying. And there was another friend I had that we were involved in horses. And we were talking about this topic. And all of a sudden he said, I'm going to share something with you. He goes, I mean, same thing. He goes, I never shared this. He goes, this is like, but I swear on my life. He goes, I was about 10, 15 years old, whatever it was, 10 or 15, 12, prepubescent. So he probably was between 10, 12, 13, I don't know. And he said that he was lying in bed and there was a little cherub floating in the corner, just this little cherub baby. He goes, just like the paintings, a little baby with wings. And he was just staring at him and he's just like fluttering over. And he said he was there for at least 5 minutes. It wasn't even like a flash. He was like 5 minutes just staring at him. And he said at first he was terrified, but then he just started looking at him. And he didn't do anything. The cherub just was staring at him. And then there was another person that same thing, confided in me and said that Virgin Mary used to come to him as a child all the time. So I had the angel experience. He saw a cherub. He saw the Virgin. I mean, if people are going to say, "Oh, they made this up," you're at an age where you couldn't even concoct these people. You wouldn't even know what kind of robe they wore or how they wear their hair. I mean, these are things that you didn't see in a movie, especially at our era. There was, we didn't have a TV in the house till, my God, the probably late 60s, so, I mean, these are things that were not concocted. So I really believe in these realms. And I think when you die, you have to really be prepared, because I think that these things can be waiting on the other side, masqueraded as like your father or as Jesus or as an angel, and lock you back into this reincarnation to 3D again. I really think that's the trap of how they keep feeding, and cycling us.
The reincarnation recycling factory, known maybe as heaven, the heavenly realm, if you go through that tunnel of light. And, they're asking you to go back to do something better than you did before because it wasn't good enough or something,
Well, think about it too, how interesting it is, because that experience is almost mirroring what we're doing to the factory farm animals. It's like we just keep recycling them, almost like we think we're doing such a good thing, like, oh, these animals are here to feed us. This is God's gift to us to feed us. And, and for them, I mean, it's just horrific Holocaust for them. Nothing but a horrible, horrible, horrible existence. But you really wonder, is anybody reincarnating as the animal? Like if they abuse the animal, they hurt the animal, are they coming back to experience what that is? I don't know. I mean, some of the Tibetans believe that. That's why they don't kill a worm or anything, because that could be your grandfather.
But many also say if you have evolved to become human, you won't become an animal again or something like that. So it's
yeah, I mean, I guess, but I think anything's possible. I don't know. I mean, but I just think that what we're doing to animals is an atrocity. But if you talk to somebody who says they're enlightened, but they're still eating meat, it's like, my God, that's one of the first things when you really, I mean, I remember when I was
But that's also a huge debate, because that's also really a big topic, and that's really dividing people a lot, about the vegan agenda, which is also part of UN Agenda 21 and 2030. And then what do we really need? Proteins and lots of B12 vitamins and lots of things that you may really only get by eating meat. That's maybe how we are now. That's what we're accustomed to or used to. That's what the system really maybe needs. But maybe that's not for the future of humanity to do that. That's also what people talk about. But then, people also say, are vegetables really that healthy for us?
Well, what's interesting is when you eat the cow or the pig or whatever, I mean, these are animals that live on grass, fescue. They're getting all that protein from barley grass, alfalfa, so they're holding, 2,000 pounds of muscle from eating grass or grains. And what's interesting to me is that it seems like almost anything that's a blood sacrifice goes back to Satanism and feeding these entities. That's why, like, when I first studied the Old Testament, and there was all these people like Abraham giving his firstborn child, or they're, putting it to the hands of Baal, the god that's the bull, and they're giving the baby, and it's in flames, and you're thinking, I used to think, how is the Bible saying it's okay to have incest, sacrifice children, sacrifice, firstborns, and, just all this bloodbath? And I think to myself, well, the Romans loved bloodlust. I mean, that's
yeah,
why
but who wrote all of those ancient holy books, and with what intent, and for what reason, and what was, how was it written in code, and with symbolic scenarios and all of that? But I mean, this is also what we hear that the top elitists are doing, having these sacrifices.
Yes.
Satanic ritual abuse with children, and also and these shape-shifting scenarios. What do you think about that? The reptilian theory.
I've never seen a reptilian, but I certainly believe they exist. I have actually seen the small aliens, and believe it or not, in a shopping mall. They were dressed with big sunglasses and hoods and everything, but it was a GNC, and I was waiting in line behind them, and they were so tiny, I couldn't help, but I was just going, God, these like tiny, but I knew they weren't kids, even though they were the size of children. Their heads seemed a little big, but they were so covered you couldn't even see skin really, and it seemed like they had makeup or something on. But I remember peering over the sunglasses just because I was curious, and I saw these huge eyeballs that were black from end to end. I mean, just huge black eyeballs. And they knew that I was watching them and realizing they weren't humanoid, but not human. And you know what happened?
You mean the gray aliens that we see in films also.
But what's interesting in that moment, the most interesting thing happened. A man in the store suddenly started convulsing, like he was like having an exorcism, and he was like thrashing around and running around and screaming. And he went to the register, and nobody knew what to do because he looked like he was just been possessed. And it was the strangest thing, because that man had that happen. Security came, took him away, but the distraction was so intense that then these two little ones paid for their stuff and laughed. I think it was a distraction. I think whatever they did, they summoned something to go inside of this guy that was shopping. And then he had this thing, like he looked like he was being electrocuted, and he was just like screaming and completely possessed. And everybody was in shock, and we all got kind of like alarmed in the circus. We didn't know if he was going to pull out a gun and start shooting people or something. We didn't know what was going on. But when I left the store, I said, these little alien beings, they did that. That was a distraction to get them out, because they realized I recognized they weren't human. So that was another really weird. So they are definitely walking among us. No doubt. Nobody could ever convince me.
But I mean, if that story is like you say it is, then they didn't take another form. A lot of people say that they take human form, so they look human, so you wouldn't see the difference.
Well, not these ones. They had these glasses on. I looked over the glasses and I saw these gargantuan black. I remember it as clear as day. It kind of shocked me, to be honest with you, but didn't shock me enough where I was terrified or anything. I just thought, well, they're in here shopping. How funny is that? It was almost like a cartoon. But I think that again, if they could get something to go inside of this man's body and possess him, which I'm convinced is what happened, or like, who's that? What was his name? Schneider, the one that went underground, and then
Phil Schneider,
and his hand was lasered off, and he had the gash in his chest. And this man was high clearance. There's no way that this man would have made this up. He was found dead. And this man, I believe him.
He did. He was found dead 2 years after saying these things.
Yeah. So, because he was creditable. If people think you're nuts, like, for instance, somebody could look at me and say, okay, she had all this trauma. It's probably like, blah, 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 whatever somebody wants to believe. I'm just like thinking, you know what, walk in my shoes and then come back and talk to me, And I think that, like, anybody who has come here in this life, okay, you could say I'm working out my karma, I'm learning lessons, maybe my lineage of my family is working out karma. I don't know. But somehow I stepped into this and I'm here and I'm dealing with it. And trust me, I want out. I mean, I don't want to be here. I mean, if it wasn't for the animals that I rescue, I have no reason to be here. And I love the planet. I love the animals. I love the beauty. I want so badly to love humanity, but humanity is so lost. And it seems that you can't change anyone. You can't put this stuff down somebody's throat and say, oh, you're in a cult, or, oh, you trust me, because what I feel right now and what I'm saying right now could change. It could change in a month. And if anybody wants to even talk about Bible stuff, even Jesus used to say, my teachings will be antiquated, like how wine is put into the flask of goat stomachs. And then when it expands and ferments, you have to put it in a bigger flask, because he likened his teachings to the same. The times will grow and the teachings will grow. And I think that like a lot of people just don't want to look at it that way. And I think to myself, why would somebody come here and say, follow me under my blood sacrifice and trust me, I have saved you, I have rescued you, when it's a blood sacrifice. But second is, why would that same person say, in the future, you will do greater things than I? It's as though it's saying, listen, learn, grow, use my example to grow. You can do this yourself, because you will be greater than I. You will change this world. You will create heaven on earth. God is within you. It's not apart from you. That's why he said, God and I are one. But he also said we have that same connection. He was just an example. So for me, I love Jesus. I love this, whether it's a story or he really existed, but you can't discredit any of the other prophets, whether it was Buddha or anybody else. It's like, you have to say, God, the stories are so similar. And it's always the sun god and the moon god and the,
Well, all of the religions have the same ingredients. They just have different names, also for the different prophets and gods and experiences, to mold it into that environment and that community. But it's really always the same, right? The same deity or entity that we hear.
What worries me is just whenever there's blood sacrifice, there's something about, I don't know if you've ever witnessed an animal being slaughtered. I have, by accident. My neighbor was butchering, he had these two beautiful steers that just babies, like a year and a half old, and they came and they hoisted them. And I walked out because my barn was right there, and he was like right on the street we share. And I almost passed out. It was the most wrong thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's never a nice thing to see, even if they do it in the best possible fast way. I mean, it's never a good thing. But of course, we also see terrible videos coming out of people of how they do at certain farms, or how they treat them, and it's real torture, and that's just horrible. So if you wanna, it's very important that the animals have a good life while they are here, even if people are gonna eat meat.
Yeah, and I've had dinner with Christians and everybody's praying, and never once have they acknowledged the dead animal on the table. Never once have they said, this animal has died for us. This animal is bled out. And they're always killed young. You're not taking like the oldest cow in the field. You're taking the year and a half. They live to be 20, 22. You're taking a baby, the steaks. I'm not talking veal, the newly borns that are put in little tiny confinements that never see the sun and never move, never suckle. I'm talking about steers and females too. Sometimes they have too many females. They're killed at a year and a half.
Yeah, because they want to eat young meat, not old, really old meat, So that's the explanation, really.
Yeah, and then the older ones, like the cows that have been giving all their milk, their slaughter goes to dog meat or whatever, And then the same thing with the bulls and stuff. The bulls, until they breed until they can't breed anymore. But basically, they all end up hamburger meat, whether it's for a dog and I think if people really understood the conditions, and I think I brought this up in our last video, but we're custodians. We're supposed to take care of them. We're supposed to take care of nature. We're supposed to make sure it keeps balance. If anything, we should be the ones saying, okay, monitor how much meat you eat. Okay, you eat meat once a week. You don't eat it every day. If you had a farm and you had to raise these animals, you'd never be butchering an animal every day. No way.
Some people have farms to do that and to produce that. So, that's the more, that's more what people do than just to have the animals, huh?
Yeah, it's right. You're right. But I mean, let's say we went back to like where everybody lived on a homestead, or they lived in a commune, or like in tribes. You would be only taking what you need. You wouldn't want to overtax your property, your land. You had too many animals, you'd overgraze. If you lived in a tribe, you'd have to move from field to field with the animals grazing on the fresh grass, where the nutrition is. They'd never stay. I'd get in arguments with my neighbor because they'd get a horse. They didn't know anything about horses, and they'd stick it in a pen, no shelter, no windbreak, nothing. And the wind chills with the rain and the cold, God only knows. I mean, how cold it would. I go, do you realize that animal would be with a herd and it would go find a windbreak? It would stand in a herd if there was nothing else, like the emperor penguins. They would get heat from a group. I said, here you've got this poor thing in a pen. It's got nowhere to go, and all the elements are hammering it. Well, it's a horse. You go live there and even put a coat on, equivalent to what that animal has. You'd still be freezing your ass off. Or they make them drink the disgusting water that hasn't been cleaned in a year, and it's got little parasites swimming all around it. I mean, I've worked for breeders, I've worked for trainers, I've worked as a groom. I've been with my hands in the dirt. I mean, my hands are beat up. I mean, it's because I'm a ranch worker now. I have seen the worst of the worst treatment, and people always somehow just say, yeah, but God put them here for us.
So you actually felt that it was your calling to take care of animals. And when did that start? I mean, how did you make the transition and say, no, I'm not going to pursue a career in acting and in singing? Or have you totally stopped that? Are you not still doing songs? Or, I mean, you did up until quite recently, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, first off, I bought my first horse when I was 22. Yeah, 22. So the horse thing, I kept with the horses, and I kept that horse until he passed away. I had him 20 years. Then now I've had another horse since birth. She's 27, and I have her son. He's 17. And then I have a rescue that I rescued 10 years ago. She's 17. So, I mean, I keep them the long term. So when you have them and you commit to them, I mean, it's like you're in it. It's a way of life. There is no other, you have to be there, especially when you have them on your property. It's no matter what happens. And I do all their trims and, anything.
And you want to do it. This is your desire, your passion for doing that, or is it like a really hard job now?
I would say that work somehow keeps my mind clear. You know how they say, what is that saying? When you idle hands is a devil's playground. Idle hands is a devil's playground, something like that. So when I'm busy and I'm working and whatever it is, I mean, and it's so funny, I'm such a good handyman. I mean, I can put up a fence, I can do roofing, I can do irrigation, I can tile, I can.
Oh, there's a cat behind you now.
Oh, yeah. And I'm at my friend's house. This isn't my house, but yeah. So I think for me, the hard work, it just seems like it purges things out, like probably what the bulimia used to do. Now it's like the work, it's like energy that's good because I produce something good.
So it's therapeutical in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as far as like, because you were asking me about the bulimia, once I kicked it, that was it. I was done.
How old were you when you kicked the bulimia?
38.
38.
And it took, for anybody out there who's got that, any kind of, eating disorder, it took 6 months of sweating it out. It wasn't something like, okay, it's kicked out. I mean, the hard part was like, okay, whatever energy, I call it an entity that entered me when I was really down in depression. Because I think depression or anger or anything, these things can come into your auric field and take over and have a party. Kind of like the Mucinex commercial with the little boogers that like are having a party in your sinuses. I kind of look at it like these things have a field day in your auric field.
But some people, it could take longer for some people than 6 months, even. And when it's been that hard and you've been so much into it, it's been wild for you and bulimia for such a long time, and everything you did constantly throwing up, eating, and the binge eating, huh?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I remember when I did go to therapists, they asked me how many times a day do you throw up? Because I had holes all over in my esophagus. I had blown out blood vessels. My teeth were like, I had a cap almost all my front teeth. And, you know, because you just destroy your teeth. And I remember they said, how many times a day do you throw up?
A day? How many times a day?
They asked me, and I said, probably 21, 22 times. And they said,
22 times a day? You're
Yeah.
kidding. How can you even do that? How do you have time for I mean, my God, that's really obsessive, isn't it? I mean, sorry for saying that, but
no, I want people to know how badly I had it. And it was really, and now in the beginning, I threw up maybe once or twice a day, and it just grew and it grew. And of course, when something would get me or I'd be anxious, it just got worse and it got worse. It's kind of like heroin, you know, it just got worse and worse and worse. And like, again, I would eat anything. It didn't matter what it was. And I felt very guilty because I was wasting a lot of food and I knew that was a sin.
and how could you even keep it a secret from people? Heidi, this must have been a dark secret surrounding you all the time. If you had to go away to purge, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing is that some people found me out, and then I would just like disassociate myself because they'd want to help me. Like Paul Nassif, he found out, and his whole family wanted to do an intervention, and I broke up with him. I couldn't deal with it. I was too embarrassed, and I said, I can't give this disease up. I can't. I know I couldn't. So that just goes to show you an intervention would have done nothing. You have got to get to this point where you say, I don't want to do this anymore.
I think I remember hearing Jane Fonda talking about her having bulimia, and that she kicked it around when she was 45 or something. You know, she also said, well, this is a matter of life and death in a way.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I remember I really started having dreams that I was going to die probably within 6 months because I had just really hurt my body so much, and I knew it. I mean, I knew.
And can you heal from it? Did you heal from it internally also, or whatever happens to you?
I don't know if I've done damage to my heart from so much of that stress on your heart when you push that food up, because it's very violent. You know, you are really, really violently pushing stuff back out, and it's very unnatural, you know, and I think it messes your chi up. I think that things have a way of moving in your body, a natural cycle, and you're like disrupting everything in your body and saying, no, that's.
Yeah, but can you heal it and turn it around? I mean, some people suggest, and we've had some experts and researchers and people that are working with natural medicine and health, saying that you can practically heal, well, everything. I don't know if that's true, but what are your thoughts on that?
I truly believe herbs, acupuncture. Acupuncture is interesting because you have all the meridians, and a good acupuncturist will see the blocks and where things aren't flowing. And then they'll put the needle here, put the needle there, put the needle there, and they'll say, now that channel's moving. So I think when they see your up pulse and your down pulse, then they'll say, because I remember a few acupuncturists saying, boy, your pulse is like very weak on this side, and you know, and I remember thinking that's the bulimia. I remember thinking that, like, I knew exactly why it was off.
Well, acupuncture can be really, really helpful. I know that from occasional back problems.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It has helped me so much. And I've also had like a few near-death experiences, because when I was down to 87 pounds, I did die at one point. They were in doing a laparoscopy, looking to see all the damage I'd done to my esophagus. I remember my heart stopped and I actually died. And I remember they were hitting me. And I think they told me they had to use those pads on me and bring me back.
And did you experience leaving the body, the soul leaving the body? So it wasn't a kind of a near-death experience that you had.
I didn't have a near death, but they told me I had flatlined. And then, and I kind of wished I would have. And then I had an appendicitis when I was 22. And same thing, I was with a guy and he thought I just had my period. So he dropped me off at my apartment. And I remember I just passed out. And like, I think it was 2 days later, my landlord finds me, I'm jaundiced. I'm so swollen down below that everything is like pushing out of my vulva. And she takes me to the gynecologist and says, something's wrong. And he said, her appendix burst. I didn't have insurance. So, and this is when I left my modeling career because of the guy in St. Louis that was stalking me, you know. So that's when I first got to California, is when my appendix burst. And he hit that guy that stalked me, came to visit me. So he was the one that said, let me take you shopping and everything. And I thought,
that was the guy who had connections to some elitist circles and maybe satanic circles or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. So talk about like the universe saying this is a toxic relationship, because my appendix burst. He says I have my period. He drops me off at my apartment and he took a cab and caught a plane and went back to St. Louis. And I'm dying basically. And my landlord finds me and takes me to the gyno. And he just gave me these like tons of these horse pill antibiotics. And I don't know what else he gave me, but he said, you have to take all of them and you have to drink this much water, this much grapefruit juice, or not grapefruit, cranberry juice. And I wasn't put in a hospital. So, and they didn't take the appendix out. They left everything in. And I remember laying in the bathtub because I was too weak to go to bed and get up and use the bathroom. So I just lay in the bathtub naked with like a blanket on me. And then if I had to go urinate or whatever, I just did it in the bathtub. And I survived it, which now looking back on it, I remember every time I closed my eyes, I thought I would die. I really thought, and I was okay with it.
You're like the cat who has 9 lives, huh? What about children? You never wanted to have children or
No, after that happened, I couldn't have babies. It scarred everything up so much that the appendix, what they told me, is it scarred up to my stomach and my uterus and everything was just like all scarred up. Now later it was so painful, I had endometriosis and everything, and I had to go in and they had to cut out the scarring. But it was like, it would have been a high risk to try to get pregnant. You know, I might have been able to, I had my fallopian tubes, I still was producing eggs and stuff, but it would have been one of those pregnancies where they would have had to really keep an eye on me.
But do you regret that you weren't able to have a child? Or
no, I love kids. I always wanted 2 kids, and I even as a kid I always had a baby, or you know, always dreamed. Even I remember my mom sometimes would cook garbanzo beans, and I called them little baby butts because they look like little baby butts. I just thought babies were the cutest thing in the world. I mean, so I was really, to this day, I love those little tiny plastic babies they used to put on baby shower cupcakes and stuff. So no, I did. And I taught roller skating to little kids when I was in my teens, and I was a babysitter, and I gave riding lessons, and kids loved me. I would go to somebody's wedding and some little child would come and crawl in my lap and fall asleep. But I have pictures at weddings, like some other kid holding on my leg, and, you know, so they'd say, God, kids really gravitate to you, but so do animals. So I figure that's probably that part of me that, that the evil couldn't touch, because I still have that. I still have this thing where, thank God, that stayed protected. And I think that was my mission. In the song Return to Innocence by Enigma has always struck a chord with me. Return to innocence. And I love the chant of the Indian in the beginning, that hey, yeah, you know, I love that. So I think that
maybe that's why you're caring for animals so much, because you weren't in a position to have children.
That's true. Yeah.
So you had an experience of knowing somebody that was quite close to you, that revealed a lot of things to you about what was going to happen in the world prophetically in a way, and also talked about, some of the darker stuff that is happening to some of the top elitists because this person had actually been a witness to it. Am I right?
Yeah, it was a good friend of mine who was a Captain Green Beret, and he was a private bodyguard for Bush Jr. when he was president. And he told me that there was a lot of Satanism going on and the secret societies, and that they were doing the one world order, and it was definitely going to happen. And he was saying, prepare, because, and this was 2008 when he told me. So it was a long time ago, and I went into a bit of shock at first, but I said, tell me everything, I want to know. So then he said that they were going to release viruses, they were going to have more wars, they were going to contaminate the food. And he said, whatever you do not take pharmaceuticals. I'm telling you right now, he said, it will destroy your natural ability to be healthy. It's going to one chain reaction to the next. He said the whole, it's all a design. And that was very, very interesting, because at the time I was on heart pills. And for him to say, get off of them and do something natural, was like, I thought it was life-threatening to me.
And he was working for George Bush Jr.
He had already retired. He had taken an early retirement and left, and he said he was going to disappear. He said, I'm not going to use my social. I'm not going to use anything. I'm going to be incognito. I'm going to have jobs that,
So what did he experience there? Did he also work for George Herbert Walker Bush Sr.?
No, he did not. But he told me that that they were calling the old people, the people that were pretty much useless, like let's just say retarded, crippled, anybody that's just like off genetically, that they were considered undesirables, and that the people that didn't go along with the system would more than likely be put in FEMA camps. I'm just saying what he said. Then he said that, let me remember, that the food was contaminated, the pharmaceuticals were contaminated, the water, the air, the chemtrails, and that he said that there was probably going to be more with frequency, like the HARP technology. And then he said that there was definitely going to be a pole shift. But he said before the pole shift, he said that, before I forget, he said that they always put the truth out in one form or another, whether it be in a movie or a book or an article or the news, some fragment of the truth, because they don't want the karma, because they cannot lie 100%. They will create really bad karma for themselves. So they always, always, always reveal the truth in one form or another, but it's always put in a way where you kind of think it's fantasy or fiction. So I remember that very clearly. Then that aliens definitely work in the government, and they shapeshift, and they're walking all over the place, and they're all over the British royal crown. He says the queen is a big shapeshifter. She's gargantuan. She's really scary. Everybody's afraid of her because she's huge. When she shapeshifts, she's huge. And he says that they're definitely, he said that they brainwash, they put people in a trance so you don't really see them. So they can shapeshift. But he said for him, something happened where it didn't take. And he remember he saw the reptilians. He saw them. And he said it's all satanic. He says they do rituals regularly, and even like stuff on the certain dates. They use sacred geometry a lot. And that's why, like, even if you look at like the government building, it's sacred geometry, and then it's put in alignment with the stars because there's certain vortexes of energy. So they use the stars a lot. They do the above and below thing. But he said that there was going to be a massive, massive, massive depopulation, huge. And that the technology was going to have a lot of the people somewhat zombified, where they really don't believe it. They don't see it coming. So those are the things that really stuck out in my mind. And I didn't sleep for like a week when he told me, but it was really interesting when he said, get off of your pills. He said, get off of them. I was on something called flecainide. And once I got off of it, it was interesting because I started feeling better. At first, I thought I needed to be on it. And actually, the doctor was trying to tell me I needed a pacemaker. And I couldn't understand. I said, how can I run like a 7-minute mile and barely be winded? And I need a pacemaker. And later, that particular doctor got court-martialed and lost his practice and everything. So that tells me he was in that group of probably underground people, because his office was loaded with all Christian stuff and all military guys with their badges and stuff. And he just presented like a certain way. But I remember what he was just telling me, you're going to need a pacemaker. And I got a second opinion, and they said, they put me on the treadmill and I'm running. And that doctor said, you don't need anything.
So this guy that you knew that had been working for George W. Bush, why was he even able or allowed to be a witness or part of these ritual ceremonies with the Queen of England, seeing her shapeshift and all of that? Did he actually tell you how he was even on that top level?
I don't remember him telling me that he went and saw the Queen shapeshift. I think that he was privy to information with other people that were there, but he was George Bush's Jr.'s security guard. So he might have traveled to England. He might have done that, but he really told me fragments without telling me all, like the whole A to Z. But he did say that the FEMA camps that he was working on the project when they were doing the railroad cars. And he said they had 2 tiers, 40 people on the top tier, 40 on the second with handcuffs. And he said that was one of the projects. Now, why in the world would they be doing that? Why would you have all these hundreds of thousands of railroad cars all around the United States, 2 tiers with handcuffs? I mean, really think about that. That's nuts. So, yeah, I mean, and he probably told me a whole lot more, but I that's just the stuff that really, really, really stuck out. And
he said that he had seen a lot. I mean, he had seen people shapeshift and seen reptilians.
Well, in the ceremonies, he says it's very, very, very satanic. He goes, I mean, it's they're worshiping the same deities that they did in the Old Testament, that they, believe it or not, the New Testament. And everything, every time that they're in a church and they're doing, you know, the water sacrament and the incense and the bell ringing, and those are all the elementals, you know, and they're always north, south, east, west, above, below, you know, they're using the elementals of the 3D realm. And then they're summoning these entities that run the dimensions here, that control it, that have this grid, and they summon them and then they feed them. You know, they do these ceremonies to appease them, to make them happy. So
they could actually make them appear in 3D form or manifest on this, let's say, on this frequency.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And he saw that. He was privy also to have seen this.
He didn't tell, he only said that it's real. So I'm assuming that he was afraid to tell me anything like, yes, over there. All he said is, I will tell you it's real. And I left an early retirement and I took half of my pay for a reason. I'm leaving because I'm terrified. He says, I'm terrified. But he did say the next billionaires will be food growers. And he said, the money's going to be worthless. He said, oh, this is the other thing he said. He said, the banks, when they decide to shut this money system down, the banks will shut down and say they're on holiday, and the gas stations and everything, there'll be some excuse, some diversion or for reason to shut it all down. And he says, when it reopens, it will be the new world order. It will be the new money. It will be the new energy system. And it's going to be a complete revamp. Now, he said, they do have the vaults with all the seeds and everything, and they do already have underground places, and they do clone. He said the cloning is very real, and most of the people that are on the surface right now are clones. He said they're not the real deal. And I know this is probably really crazy for some people, and I know for me it hit me really hard when he was telling me this, but I believe him.
What do you mean? What do you mean the people on the surface? You mean the elitists, not just human beings?
Yeah, like anybody that's on the surface right now, because he said that there is going to be a pole shift, and he said the pole shift is probably going to be before 2030. So he said that the pole shift is so close, and you can see the weather patterns getting crazy, and the solar flares are going crazy, and other planets have already had their axis shift. It's already flipped. I think Pluto and a few of the other ones. So, I watch another channel called Suspicious Observers, and they're very accurate. They're saying NASA does not put this stuff out. So that the pole shift thing is definitely going to happen. When, where, you can just kind of see the weather, and everything's kind of going chaotic. And it makes sense to me that the electromagnetic fields are also affecting our brains and our emotions and stuff. So it all ties into the wackiness. But he did say that's definitely going to happen, and it's happened way more times than they admit. It doesn't happen every few million years. It happens like every 12,000 years. It's a cycle, and it's very frequent. And that's why there's so many like buildings and stuff on the side of a hill, or underwater. And even Jacques Cousteau, there was another friend of mine who he was a captain, and he circumnavigated the globe 7 times. And he told me he was good friends with Jacques Cousteau. And he said Jacques Cousteau was not allowed to talk about this, but he said that in Antarctica, that under the water, there was palm trees and everything in perfect condition, just frozen in ice. So that tells you how recently there was a pole shift. And they've obviously found woolly mammoths just barely under the snow, completely intact, with the food still in its belly. So come on, So he just affirmed all of that, all of these things that kind of make sense. The Satanism, the planet shifting, that there's cycles. And that's why they're able to write these books like the Bible and look like it's all prophetic and holy and perfect. But really what you're doing is feeding entities, and these religions are keeping you captive because you don't think for yourself, and you're saying, yes, rescue me. So you're basically surrendering all your power as a co-creator or creator. So you're handing...
People surrender also to the media, because they listen to all of that and they believe all of that. That's why all of these things can actually happen.
Yes. And the other thing is idol worship. I mean, think about the actors, the sports stars, the singers. It's all this idol worship, which is such a no-no, but it's also you're giving your power by being in love with this idol. And even by desiring to be famous, you're even surrendering your power to be in the moment, connected to all that is right now that you can manifest. And it's interesting too that actors play acting. You're in a play or you're in a movie. So it's just like this fantasy. And why do people that are playing get paid so much astronomical money for something that's playing, and again, money's currency, it's moving, it's water. I mean, it's intangible. So I think that there's just so much now coming to the light. But my friend did, and I never heard from him again. He did disappear. He is gone.
Wow. So David Icke was actually right about everything he said.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I've watched some of David Icke, and yeah, I concur with that. It just feels to me, everybody has their own opinion. And for some people, this might sound so loony and so out there. But, when I listen to someone like Osho or Alan Watts or Manly P. Hall or Russell, Walter Russell, William Wright, these are all people that, like William Wright was murdered because he created the organ, and he was healing people, and he was figuring things out about our auric field, and they kill him the day he's supposed to be released. So there's just so much stuff that all ties in.
It's always interesting to hear when people talk about whistleblowers in a way, and confirm some of the things that we've been discussing so much when it comes from different angles, like confirming what David Icke or many, many other people have said. Then it's always interesting, and fascinating, important information.
Yeah, when you watch things like the Holocaust and all those interviews from the Holocaust, they're all identical. They all say the same thing. And again, it's like how the people that were running the camps were so evil. There were very few good people. It's like that they had been taken over, and they were getting off torturing these people, making them drink, drops of water out of the dirt, or,
There are certainly some interesting revelations happening also about the Holocaust, that maybe that history has been altered a bit. Maybe not all of it, but some, maybe to a certain degree. So that's also, something to look into at some point.
I will close out our interview with one thing that I will say. When I was 5 years old, I had a prophetic dream 5 times over. And it came to me so strong. It was a skeleton would come, and he would put me in a sedan in the back seat, and he drove me through the freeways in big cities. And I would see everything was gray, no birds, no trees, no nothing, ash everywhere. And I remember looking out the window, and I saw bodies with the intestines on the outside. They looked like they had imploded or exploded. And as a 5-year-old, I never saw that. I didn't know what intestines or brains look like, but I saw it. And I remember not wanting to look, but I would have to look. I was made to look. It was somehow I was meant to see it. So I would wake up every day and say, I saw the end of the world. I saw the end of the world. And my brothers and sisters hated it when I wake up and say, I had the dream again. The skeleton came and got me. And, and it was really weird because I really was afraid of skeletons for a long time. But the way I look at it is that was also a sign of the end of the times. When I would start seeing skeletons everywhere, I knew that the end was coming close. And as you know, skeletons became the fashion. I mean, who doesn't have the skull rings, the skull tattoos, the skull and that baby clothes with skeletons? So when I started seeing all that, I said, oh my God, it's close, the skeleton. So that was a dream that I had over and over and over. I saw what looked like an atomic end. Now that's probably one reality of 3D Earth, but this 3D Earth will die. I believe that there's another offshoot planet, like how two cells divide. I really believe that there's another planet like the Indians talked about that.
We're in a multiverse with maybe an infinite number of earthly realms or realities going on at the same time.
But this is the division. What's happening right now, I look at it like sacred geometry, like the figure 8, the infinity, and we're right in the center point. And you're either going to pop into the next higher frequency, or you're going to go into the old, but the old is dying. And that's something that dream really showed me, that the 3D reality is coming to a complete end. Now, when that scenario is going to happen, I don't know.
You talk about ascension and going into the 5th dimension in a way.
Yeah. Choosing love, choosing to love all life as yourself. That when you look at any other life form, you see yourself, you see God in that life form. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a dog, a cat, a plant, a fish, water, a tree, that you actually really connect and realize it's all one. And that we are all one. And until we honor all life as we honor our own temple, and first you have to honor your own temple. If you're decimating your own temple and not honoring it, how are you going to see God in anything else? So it starts with you first. So give up the addictions, give up anything that is harboring and leaving an open auric field for attack spiritually. Because once you get in that beautiful place of being, okay, I honor my temple, I honor me, I honor everything. And then you open your eyes and you see the whole world as a temple. You see the whole world as God. You see the beauty in absolutely everything. When you hold a child or you hold an animal, you feel nothing but love. And it just, for me, I've been there where I feel this sense of that I've already somehow ascended to another place, because that love is so beautiful and has nothing to do with money or fame or anything. But obviously we're still here in 3D form. So we're going to ride this wave out, and it's going to get difficult. It's going to get scary. It's going to get tough. But what I can say is, if you really, really choose love, you are going high, and you're going to get on that summit, and there's no turning back. And that's the good news, is that it is that simple. Choose love, and choose love to see it in all things, and you will just blossom into the all, So it is pretty awesome to feel that and know that. And that is where we're going.
Absolutely. That's a very beautiful message. And it's been really emotional and deep and thought-provoking and eye-opening to hear your story, or at least some of it. And I think certainly this is it fits very well with this series we have now called Life Stories. And it's certainly mind-blowing. And I think it's amazing that you came on here to share it and also talk about some of the other stuff, because you are also obviously a truth researcher. So you've done a lot of research and have a lot of thoughts to share here. So it's been really amazing, and I look forward to meeting you again. And I want to thank you so much, Erika Nann, for being on Age of Truth TV, Life Stories, with all of the obstacles we had, you going in the car and now being here. So thank you so much for being on.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your patience and for accepting this interview. And God bless you for what you do. And may you be led on this path with angels surrounding you and guiding you to reaching all ends of the world, because I really believe that that's why you're here. And that's why you've started this channel. And you both, everyone works so well together, and you have a beautiful, I don't know how to pronounce your partner's name. Lauge. He does such a good job, and just hats off to him, because he's the one that does all the stuff behind the scenes. So, and you're such a great interviewer. So thank you so much for allowing me to open up, because I have not opened up like that. And it shocked me, because it was like out of control. And I was like, God bless you, because it was meant to come out. I didn't think it was. So.
Thank you. Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that. And we really felt, everything here. And thanks for opening up like that. I really appreciate it. You're a very special and wonderful person. So thank you, Erika. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you again. Okay.
Thank you. You too. God bless you. Thank you. Bye,
Thank
love.
you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Age of Truth TV Life Stories. And thank you very much to Erika Nann for sharing her story. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, ageoftruth.tv as well. Please also subscribe to our alternative channels on BitChute and Brighteon. Your support is greatly needed and appreciated. And on behalf of the Age of Truth TV team, we thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.